Honorable Senate President and the Senators of the Republic of the Philippines.
Hi, sir. Check. The fifth session of the Senate, the second regular session of the 19th Congress is hereby called to order. Today, the chamber will be led in prayer by our distinguished colleague, Senator Christopher Lawrence Bongo.
Mahal na Panginoon, kami po'y nagpupugay sa inyong mahal na pangalan. Nais namin ipahayag ang aming pasasalamat sa mga biyayang patuloy ninyong binibigay sa aming bansang Pilipinas. Gayunpaman, pinapanalangin namin ang aming pangamba at pagkakabahala dulot ng mga nagdaang bagyo, ang bagyong Egay at bagyong Falcon na tumama at nagdulot ng malaking pinsala sa aming bansa. Kami po ay humihiling ng iyong patnubay at proteksyon para sa lahat ng ating mga kababayan na apektado ng mga bagyong ito, naway mabigyan sila ng sapat na tibay ng loob at lakas upang harapin ang hamon ng panahong ito. Sa kabila ng lahat ng ito, kami po ay nagpapasalamat sa mga pagkakataong nagpapakita ng aming pagkakaisa at katatagan bilang isang bansa. At sana ay patuloy ninyo kaming gabayan sa aming pagtupad sa mga tungkulin sa bayan dahil naniniwala kami na ang serbisyo sa tao ay serbisyo din sa inyo, O Diyos. Muli kami po ay humihiling ng inyong patnubay at proteksyon. Panginoon, pagpalain ninyo ang aming mahal na Pilipinas. Sa ngalan ng ating mahal na Panginoon. Amen.
Amen. Secretary, please call the roll call of members.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senator Angara, Senator Binay, Senator Cayetano Alan, Senator Cayetano Pia, Senator De La Rosa, Senator Ejercito, Senator Escudero, Senator Estrada, Senator Gatchalian, Senator Go, Senator Ontiveros, Senator Lapid, Senator Legarda, Senator Marcos, Senator Padilla, Senator Pimentel, Senator Poe, Senator Revilla, Senator Tolentino, Senator Tulfo, Senator Villanueva, Senator Villar Cynthia, Senator Villar Mark, the Senate President.
With 21 senators present, the chair declares the presence of a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we dispense with the reading of the journal, may I just be allowed to acknowledge some guests from the gallery? Our guests of this representation, Mr. President, we have with us Bishop Leo Alconga, the President of Philippines for Jesus Movement, Reverend Mars Rodriguez, Senior Pastor of Capital City Foursquare Church. They are all here with us, Mr. President, and the members of the body of Christ. Guests of Senator Sani Angara, AGAP Party List Representative Nicanor Briones. Guests of Senator Legarda, guests from the Climate Change Commission, led by Vice Chairperson and Executive Director Robert E.A. Borge. We welcome all of them in this August chamber.
Yes, we would like to welcome you to your Senate, ladies and gentlemen. And to the members of the Body of Christ movement, welcome po to the Senate. You're always welcome here. God bless you, always.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the fourth session, Monday, July 31st, 2023, and consider the same as approved. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved.
Mr. President, this juncture, with the permission of the body, I move that we proceed with the reference of business.
There being no objection to the motion, Secretary, please proceed.
Messages of the President of the Philippines. Letter of His Excellency President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. dated 26 January 2023, submitting for the Senate's consideration and concurrence the treaty between the Government of the Republic of the Philippines and the Government of Canada on the transfer of sentenced persons and on cooperation in the enforcement of penal sentences, which was signed on 22 May 2003 in Manila.
Refer to Committee on Foreign Relations.
Letter of His Excellency President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. dated 29 May 2023, certifying to the necessity of the immediate enactment of Senate Number 1846, an act protecting consumers and merchants engaged in internet transactions, trading for this purpose the Electronic Commerce Bureau, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes.
Per to Committee on Rules.
Letter of His Excellency President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. dated 29 May 2023, certifying to the necessity of the immediate enactment of Senate Number 2219, an act further amending Republic Act Number 11213, otherwise known as the Tax Amnesty Act, as amended by Republic Act Number 11569 by extending the period of availment of the estate tax amnesty until June 14, 2025, and for other purposes.
To the Archives.
Messages from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House informing the Senate that on 24 July 2023, it adopted House Resolution Number 1122. Resolution informing the Senate that the quorum being present, the House of Representatives has entered upon the exercise of its functions.
To the Archives.
Letter from the House informing the Senate that on 24 July 2023, it concurred with Senate Concurrent Resolution Number 12.
To the Archives.
Resolutions. Proposed Senate Resolution 699, commending and congratulating the Philippine contingent for their impressive performance in the 2023 Asian Senior Artistic Gymnastics Championships last June 15 to 18, 2023, held in Singapore, Senator Revilla Jr.
Committee on Rules.
700, directing the appropriate Senate committee to conduct an inquiry on the alleged improper, unfair, non-transparent, and abusive grading practices of and improper and fraudulent crediting of units by private higher education institutions in possible violation of BP 232 or the Education Act of 1982 and other laws and regulations issued by the Commission on Higher Education. Senator Tulfo.
Committee on Higher Technical Vocational Education.
701, urging the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights to look into the questionable practice of local sports associations of not considering naturalized citizens as local players in domestic leagues. Senator Tolentino.
To the Committee on Justice, Human Rights, and Sports.
704, directing the appropriate Senate committees to conduct an inquiry on the capsizing of the MB Aya Express, resulting in the death of 27 individuals with the end in view of seeking accountability and determining whether maritime safety regulations have been complied with prior to sailing. Senator Poe.
Committee on Public Services.
705, urging stronger safety measures for marine vessels in the Philippines. Senator Tulfo.
Committee on Public Services.
706, resolution directing the Committee on Accountability of Public Officers and Investigations to investigate allegations of corruption and irregularities at the National Center for Mental Health. Senator Tulfo.
To the Committees on Accountability of Public Officers, Health, and Demography.
707, resolution strongly condemning the continued harassment of Filipino fishermen and the incursions in the West Philippine Sea by the Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels, and urging the Philippine government to take appropriate action in securing our sovereign rights to our exclusive economic zone, and to call on China to stop its illegal activities in the West Philippine Sea in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Senator Zubiri.
To Committee on Rules. There's an additional reference of business. We can proceed.
Additional reference of business. Bills on first reading. Senate Number 2269, providing guidelines for the establishment and operation of local colleges and universities and for other purposes. Senator Villar C.
To the Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Local Government, Ways and Means.
2270, an act amending Section 8 of RA 7722. Senator Tolentino.
To the Committee on Higher Technical Vocational Education.
Senate Number 2271, an act amending Sections 4, 5, 6, 8, and 14 of RA 11053 by Senator Tolentino.
To the Committees on Public Order and Justice, Human Rights.
2272, amending Sections 3, 17, and 43 of RA 9184 and for other purposes. Senator Tolentino.
To the Committee on Finance.
2273, requiring the participation of the OSG in all contract negotiations with foreign governments, corporations, entities, or individuals, amending for the purpose Section 35, Chapter 2, Title 3, Book 4 of EO 292 and for other purposes. Senator Tolentino.
Committee on Justice and Human Rights.
2274, creating a district engineering office in the 5th Legislative District of Batangas and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Tolentino.
To the Committees on Public Works and Finance.
2275, establishing the Cordillera Autonomous Region. Senator Padilla.
To the Committees on Local Government, Electoral Reforms, Ways and Means, and Finance.
2276, mandating the TESDA to design and implement technical vocational education and training and livelihood programs specifically for rehabilitated drug dependents and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Estrada.
The Committee on Higher Technical Vocational Education and Finance.
2277, granting free tuition for government employees enrolled in graduate education master's program in state universities and colleges, Senator Estrada.
To the Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Civil Service, and Government Reorg.
2278, declaring the immediate environs of the National Shrine of our Mother of Perpetual Help, popularly known as the Baclaran Church, located along Ross Boulevard, Parañaque City, a heritage site and tourist destination. Senator Estrada.
Committees on Culture and Arts, Tourism, and Finance.
2279, recognizing the indigenous cultural communities and indigenous peoples, community conserved territories and areas, establishing for the purpose the National ICCA Registry, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Estrada.
To Committees on Culture, Cultural Communities, Muslim Affairs, and Finance.
2280, providing for the development of sustainable cities and communities in the country. Senator Estrada.
Committees on Urban Planning, Housing and Resettlement, Sustainable Development Goals, and Future Statement.
2281, granting free competency-based assessment for senior high school students taking training, vocational livelihood track, and other SHS tracks requiring certificates of competency and national certificates and appropriating funds therefore. Senator Estrada.
Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Basic Education, Finance.
2282, an act further strengthening the powers and functions of the authority of the Freeport area of Bataan, amending for the purpose RA 9278, Senator Villanueva.
Committees on Economic Affairs, Local Government, and Finance.
2283, establishing the Comprehensive Chemical Engineering Law and repealing RA 9297, Senator Tolentino.
To the Committee on Civil Service and Government Reorganization.
2284, establishing a TESDA Training and Assessment Center in Haniway, Iloilo, to be known as the Haniway Iloilo TESDA Training and Assessment Center, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education and Finance.
2285, establishing the Zamboanga del Sur Technical Education and Skills Development Authority Provincial Training and Assessment Center to be located in the municipality of Labangan, Zamboanga del Sur, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Marcos.
Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education and Finance.
2286, prescribing the use of neo-ethnic Philippine textiles in the academic regalia of all SUCs, appropriating funds therefore. Senator Estrada.
Committee on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Science and Technology, and Finance.
2287, establishing information and communications technology hubs nationwide. Senator Estrada.
Committees on Science and Technology, Local Government, Ways and Means, and Finance.
2288, mandating the establishment of Muslim prayer rooms in all public offices and establishments. Senator Villar M.
To the Committee on Cultural Communities, Muslim Affairs.
2289, promoting popular Filipino fiestas for the purpose of boosting tourism and local business and for other purposes. Senator Villar M.
Committees on Tourism, Culture and Arts, and Finance.
2290, allowing the free use of public places available for art exhibits of local artists. Senator Villar M.
Committees on Culture and Arts, Tourism, and Finance.
2291, defining and prohibiting senior citizen abuse, providing penalties therefore and for other purposes. Senator Villanueva.
The Committees on Justice and Human Rights, Social Justice, and Rural Development, and Finance.
2292, an act to mandate all college institutions to recognize and give honors to students that attain the required grade, and this allowing the disqualification thereof on the ground of failure to obtain the necessary grade for a specific subject, providing for a retroactive effect. Senator Villar M.
Committee on Higher Technical Vocational Education.
2293, an act defining electronic violence against women and their children, providing protective measures and prescribing penalties for violations thereof, amending RA 9262. Senator Villar M.
Committee on Women and Children, Family Relations, and Science and Technology.
2294, declaring the maritime zones under the jurisdiction of the Republic of the Philippines by Senator Tolentino.
To the Special Committee on Maritime, Philippine Maritime and Admiralty Zones.
2295, strengthening the Bulacan State University as a system, providing for its powers and functions, amending for the purpose RA 7665, Senator Gatchalian.
Committees on Higher Technical Vocational Education, Ways and Means, and Finance.
2296, modifying the salary schedule for civilian government personnel and authorizing the grant of additional benefits and for other purposes. Senator Revilla Jr.
Committees on Civil Service, Government Reorganization, and Finance.
2297, enhancing the medical access of overseas Filipino workers and their families, establishing for the purpose the Overseas Filipino Workers Hospital, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes. Senator Go.
To the Committees on Health and Demography, Migrant Workers, and Finance.
2298, amending certain provisions of RA 10845 by Senator Tulfo.
Committees on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, Justice and Human Rights.
2299, providing the healthcare benefits and social security coverage to cabos and cobradores of small town laterin for other purposes. Senator Tulfo.
Committees on Games and Amusements, Labor and Employment, and Human Resource Development.
2300, institutionalizing the rules and system loss cap for electric distribution utilities, Senator Escudero.
Committees on Energy and Public Services.
2301, exempting electricity sales from value-added tax, further amending sections 108 and 109 of the NIRC as amended, Senator Escudero.
Committees on Ways and Means and Energy.
2302, proclaiming the first Monday of August every year as the National Line Workers Appreciation Day, Senator Escudero.
Committee on Energy.
2303, providing mandatory insurance coverage and other benefits for all line workers, Senator Escudero.
Committees on Energy, Labor and Employment, Human Resource Development.
2304, providing for the national policy and framework for energy advocacy, creating the Energy Advocacy Council Office and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Escudero.
Committees on Energy, Civil Service, and Finance.
2305, providing for the establishment of a Level 2 General Hospital in the municipality of Basilisa, province of Dinagat Islands, and appropriating funds therefore, Senator Marcos.
To the Committee on Rules. Session suspended.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, before we proceed, we'd like to acknowledge some guests from the gallery, guests of our dear colleague Senator De La Rosa, Police Brigadier General Nicolas Salvador, Police Brigadier General Rogelio Ponce Peñones, and Police Colonel Wilson Santos. We welcome all of them.
Welcome to the Senate, to your Senate, men and women of the Philippine National Police.
Yes, Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we consider proposed Senate Resolution number 652, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution numbers 653, 654, 655, and 660, expressing the condolences of the Senate on the death of the Honorable Rodolfo Biazon. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved. We ask the Secretary to read the title of the measure.
Resolution expressing the profound sympathy and sincere condolences of the Senate of the Philippines on the death of the Honorable Rodolfo Pong G. Biazon, former Senator, Congressman, and Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 652, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 653, 654, 655, and 660, subject to style.
Yes, and just for the information of the body, we were on break when our distinguished colleague passed away, so we could not pass any resolution. That's why there's a delay in the passage of this resolution, just for the information of the body. There being no objection to the motion of our distinguished Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved. We propose Senate Resolution number 652, taking consideration proposed Senate Resolution 653, 654, 655, and 660 is hereby adopted by the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Our condolences once again to the
The
Biazon
Biazon
family.
family. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, at this juncture and with the permission of the body, I move to consider proposed Senate Resolution number 718, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution number 659 and 707, and for the Secretary to read the title of the measure. This is the resolution pertaining to the continued harassment of Filipino fishermen in the West Philippine Sea by Chinese Coast Guard.
Yes, there being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, motion is approved. We ask the Secretary to proceed with the reading of the title of the resolution.
Resolution strongly condemning the continued harassment of Filipino fishermen and the persistent incursions in the West Philippine Sea by the Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels, and urging the Philippine government to take appropriate action in asserting and securing the Philippines' sovereign rights over its exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, and to call on China to stop its illegal activities in accordance with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and the 2016 ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration.
Yes, thank you,
Mr.
Majority.
President, no other member wishes to interpolate or propose amendments to the measure, as this was thoroughly discussed yesterday, Mr. President, in our caucus. With the consent of the body, I now move that we adopt proposed Senate Resolution number 718, taking into consideration proposed Senate Resolution numbers 659 and 707, subject to style. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the Majority Floor Leader, proposed Senate Resolution number 718, taking consideration proposed Senate Resolutions number 659 and 707 is hereby adopted by the Senate.
Yes, Mr. President, thank you very much. And again, let me state for the record and with the permission of our dear colleagues that all members of the Senate be made co-authors of this resolution.
Yes, there being no objection, motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the approval and adoption, Mr. President, of proposed Senate Resolution number 718, may I move that we recognize the distinguished Deputy Minority Leader for her manifestation, Mr. President, of the said adoption of the measure, Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Our distinguished Deputy Minority Floor Leader, a true patriot of the Republic, no other than Senator Risa Ontiveros is recognized.
Salamat kaayo, Mr. President. I would first like to thank all my colleagues, our colleagues, for this concerted effort to not only make the West Philippine Sea issue a part of our national conversation, but also for ensuring that the Philippine government take the necessary steps to consolidate global support over our historic 2016 arbitral award. This bipartisan effort tells the Filipino people that when it comes to matters of national sovereignty, we will never be bullied into submission. In the face of relentless China propaganda since last week, we held our ground. Sa kabila ng mga fake news at kasinungalingan para mapigil ang pag-adopt, we stood firm. Isang napakahalagang tagumpay ito, hindi lang ng Senado, kundi ng buong Pilipinas. The Senate crossed party lines to stand unified for our country. I would like to thank my minority leader, Senator Coco Pimentel, for his advice and support. And I would also especially like to thank Senate President Mig Zubiri for helping us reach a consensus on a resolution that strongly captures the anger and frustration of the Filipino people. Isang malaking pasasalamat din sa Department of Foreign Affairs at National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea sa kanilang oras at panahon para matiyak na maayos at naaayon ang resolution sa mandato naman ng ehekutibo. The fight against China's reckless behavior in the West Philippine Sea does not end here. Tuloy ang laban. Dagang salamat, Mr. President. Mabuhi.
Thank you very much. And to add also, Majority Leader, if I may, we came out with this strong consensus yesterday after discussions with the West Philippine Sea Task Force, Majority Leader, my dear colleagues, together with the Armed Forces Chief of Staff, General Browner, and DFA Secretary Manalo. And actually, we never watered down the resolutions that we filed. We actually strengthened the first resolutions that we initially filed with Senator Risa. I think what happened here is we strengthened the position of government. Now we gave them several options to choose on how to deal with our neighbors in the north. And the beauty of this is with proper consensus and of course consultation amongst our colleagues, we had come out unanimous with these options. And we thank our dear colleagues that we stand by each other and by our country. Regardless of political color, regardless of where we come from politically, we are together when it comes to the sovereignty of our country. And I'm very proud of the Senate for doing so. So maraming salamat, Risa, and to our dear colleagues, Majority Leader, maraming salamat.
Yes, Mr. President, we are in unison in strongly condemning the harassment of our Philippine Coast Guard. Mr. President, our dear colleague, Senator Francis Tolentino, would also like to make a short manifestation. May I move that he be recognized, Mr.
Another
President?
patriot,
No, Mr.
Yes,
President,
Mr. President.
a Republican by blood.
no, Mr. President, it's not a
Senator Francis Tolentino is recognized.
it's not a manifestation. It's just a parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President. Earlier on, I heard that a proposed measure coming from this representation relative to the Maritime Zone Bill was referred to the newly created subcommittee on Maritime and Admiralty Zone. Mr. President, we have been referring, I understand that we have created a subcommittee, but have we constituted formally the committee in accordance with the rules? Do we have now warm bodies, Mr. President, to hear this
I think
measure?
we jumped the gun. You're absolutely correct. I'm being told by my secretariat now, we have not yet elected members, which we will do after your manifestation.
We wanted to
Thank you,
put on
Mr.
record,
President.
Mr. President, that
We are
after-
proactive. We are a proactive Senate.
That
So
after the manifestation, if you recall, Mr. President, when the good gentleman from Cavite raised this particular issue, the next day, Mr. President, we came up with a resolution, adopting the resolution
We adopted the
to,
resolution. That's correct.
create a special committee that deals with the maritime laws, Mr. President. And we agree, Mr. President, that I think it's timely. I was told by the Secretariat that I think today, Mr. President, we will be able, if not tomorrow, we'll be able to elect the members.
maybe
and-
today, we could ask
can
the
do this,
chairperson. No?
Yeah, are we electing him as the
Are we electing
chairperson?
the-
I'm just kidding, Mr. President,
I
but
believe he's the
I
most
am
knowledgeable.
nominating also the Senate
Senator from
Chair Committee of the Senate Committee on Justice to chair the said committee, Mr. President. But we'll do that later, Mr. President, with the permission of Senator Tolentino and our good colleague from the great province of Davao and Batangas.
And Bohol.
Bohol, Mr. President. Senator Bato de la Rosa would also like to make a short manifestation on the passage and adoption of Senate Resolution number 718. May I move that he be
Our
recognized?
distinguished colleague from the great province of the provinces of Davao and Bohol is recognized. My compadre,
and also-
Bato de la Rosa.
And also your compatriot, Mr. President.
A fellow compatriot.
Yes.
You're not only a compatriot by words, but by deeds. You've risked your life many times for our country. We salute you for that, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Majority Leader. Good afternoon, Mr. President, dear colleagues. The call to uphold our country's sovereignty is a tall order. It is a duty that is deeply embedded in every Filipino's heart. Our country, with all its islands and waters embraced therein, belong to the Filipino people. This is the glaring truth that the whole world must accept and respect. Mr. President, I stand before you today as I join this august chamber as we vigorously denounce in its strongest terms the continuous reprehensible acts of China in wrongfully asserting its might over our territory, specifically over the West Philippine Sea, and for persistently tormenting our fishermen in areas within the country's exclusive economic zone. Ang Pilipinas ay para sa Filipino. Ang yamang dagat na nasasakupan ng teritoryo ng Pilipinas ay kailanman hindi pag-aari ng kahit na anong banyagang bansa. Ang biyaya ng dagat at lupa ng ating bansa ay para lamang sa Pilipino at walang dayuhan ang magpapaalis sa Pilipino sa loob ng teritoryo ng Pilipinas. After the 2016 arbitral award issued by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Netherlands, that upheld the country's sovereign rights and jurisdiction in its exclusive economic zone, the Philippine government has been consistently asserting and exercising its authority over the West Philippine Sea and the disputed territories therein. However, it is deplorable to say the least that China aggressively refused and continuously refused to recognize our country's sovereign right and callously violates the 2016 arbitral ruling. Ang patuloy na pagmamataas ng China sa hindi pagtugon sa paggalang sa karapatan ng Pilipinas sa ating nasasakupang teritoryo ay patunay lamang na hindi sapat ang ating mga protesta laban sa ginagawa ng pamahalaang Chino. This representation is one with the chamber in urging the Philippine government through the Department of Foreign Affairs in pursuing more vigorous legal remedies in securing the safety and integrity of our territory and in protecting the rights and interests of our fishermen in the disputed areas in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much to our distinguished colleague, Senator Bato de la Rosa. Fellow patriot, through and through.
Yes,
Another
Mr. President.
conservative Republican by blood. Yes, our distinguished colleague, Senator, our distinguished minority floor leader,
Yes,
Senator
seeking the
Coco
floor, Mr.
Pimentel
President.
is recognized.
Yesterday, Mr. President, I delivered a speech which I call the realistic sauna. And immediately after the speech, we adjourned, we suspended session. And then when we resumed session, we immediately tackled the LGU income classification bill, Mr. President. So may I know what has happened to that to that subject matter or the speech, Mr.
Yeah.
President.
Thank you. Majority
Thank
Leader?
you. Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, we have not acted nor disposed it yet, Mr. President. It is still on the floor. We were approached by several members of this August chamber who had expressed their desire to ask some questions, Mr. President. Whether they are ready to interpolate today or tomorrow, that I don't know, Mr. President. If none, Mr. President, let me state on the record that we will refer it, as I mentioned it with the Minority Leader, to the proper committee, which for the meantime would be the Committee on Rules, Mr. President. So that is the status now, Mr. President.
Is that satisfy
So,
the?
it will be referred to the Committee on Rules, and then we will suspend consideration thereof. In the meantime, while others are preparing for their interpellation.
Is this the bill of Senator James?
This is the contra sona, Mr. President,
Oh, the contra
of
sona.
our dear colleague, the Minority Leader, Mr. President.
So we suspended consideration?
Yes,
Is
Mr.
that
President.
correct? So we can
That's
resume
the fact that
consideration.
we are suspending it. As mentioned earlier, Mr. President, several of our colleagues would like to ask some questions, Mr. President.
Are they ready, Majority Leader? Hindi pa.
Suspended.
Mr. President, I don't think, we have a handful of items in our
Okay.
agenda today, Mr. President. Unfortunately, Mr. President, as much as I wanted I would appeal to the leadership and our dear colleagues to hold their horses, Mr. President, and perhaps we can tackle this particular speech of our Minority Leader next time, Mr. President. If that is okay.
It's all right.
The only reason I'm bringing this up, Mr. President, is that so that we follow the rules by when it's
Yes.
items are properly disposed of or acted upon. So
Yes. In other words, it's stable. It's stable for the meantime.
Yes, Mr. President.
So that we can tackle it up later on for interpellations.
Yes, Mr. President. So it's still suspended, Mr. President. Just suspended, Mr.
then he will.
President.
Thank you very much,
So, okay.
my distinguished colleagues.
Yes. Do you want to take it? Sir President, may I move for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
Session suspended for a minute.
Mr. President, the good gentleman from the great city of Taguig and Pateros, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, would like to make a manifestation regarding the resolution that we adopted, PS Resolution number 718. May I move that he be recognized, Mr. President?
Our distinguished colleague, former Secretary of Foreign Affairs, and our representative of Taguig and Pateros, the Republic of the Philippines, Senator Cayetano, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, may I first congratulate the Chamber in the same manner po ng isa nating binabantayan ay kung magkakaroon ng consensus sa UN. Napakahirap po na makakuha ng consensus sa 24 na senador na iba-iba ang perspektibo, pare-parehong nagmamahal sa ating bansa, pare-pareho pong gusto na masettle yung issue, of course, in favor of the Philippines ng ating territorial rights, ang ating sovereign rights, ang ating sovereignty, no? So let me congratulate the Senate President, of course, Senator Jinggoy, the chairperson of the Defense Committee, and Senator Risa, sponsors nung iba't ibang resolution for sitting down with the National Task Force Chairperson, Secretary Anyo, with, of course, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Secretary Manalo, at in-expect natin na lahat ng gawin ni Secretary Manalo ay panalo siyempre ang Pilipinas. We cannot reveal the details of the meeting because it's an executive session, and I think at the appropriate time you can declassify it, Mr. President, or the majority of the senators. Pero for now, I think allow me to make a manifestation just to highlight certain points of consensus that led us to support this resolution. Dahil napaka-importante po na ang countries around the world, including po China, Vietnam at Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, who was once also a claimant or has also some claims in the South China Sea, West Philippine Sea. Napaka-importante na makitang may consensus at nagkakaisa tayo dito sa Senado, especially in our role sa foreign affairs, sa diplomacy, which is of course sa pagpapasa ng mga treaties and sa pag-a-advise sa atin na Pangulo. So number one, I just want to point out na napakabigat na balance ang pag-usapan ang kahit anong territorial dispute. Ngayon po, hindi po lingid sa kalaman ng lahat, nanalo din po ang Taguig sa territorial dispute sa Makati involving 10 barangay. And klarong-klaro yung desisyon, pero naghihintay pa kami sa DILG sa enforcement. Eto nga, walang enforcement mechanism yung UNCLOS, no? But just like in Taguig and Makati, ang number one po na tinitignan namin, and I believe also tinitignan ng city officials ng Makati and our dear colleague, of course, Senator Nancy, kapakanan po ng mga residente. So, you know, during the time that we were discussing this resolution, the Russian government had some objections regarding the production of grains and the export of grains of Ukraine. And now, hindi po magamit yung Black Sea freely to transport corn and wheat. And I think Ukraine supplies about 25% of that. Napakalaking producer ng rice ang India at nag-decide silang hindi sila mag-export ng rice. Hindi pa nga po bumababa ang tubig sa maraming lugar, kasama po sa hometown ni Joel Villanueva, ng aking asawa si Lani at ng aking lolo, no, sa Bulacan, ay may parating na naman na bagyo. Of course, the north is also badly battered, no? And napakalaki ng damage sa agriculture. And then today, may big time increase sa ating oil price, no? So meaning, yung presyo po ng bigas na staple natin ay apektado. And people might say na ang layo naman yan sa usapan ng territory, sovereign rights at West Philippine Sea. At ito po ang burden ngayon ni President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos. That was the burden of President Rodrigo Duterte. That was the burden of President Noynoy Aquino, the balance. So I respectfully disagree with our minority leader. I see his point, but I disagree when he said na na-disappoint siyang hindi na-mention yung West Philippine Sea sa SONA. Part of me agrees with you na magandang ma-emphasize, but part of it also is the balance. The amount of information the President has, the amount of intelligence is different sa atin. So I think it was right of the advocates and of the minority leader to mention that, to push that. Ibig sabihin po, yung mga nagbabantay ng atin sovereignty at sovereign rights, tama na itulak nyo. Pero bigyan nyo rin ng room ang atin leaders kasi yung ekonomiya natin at kapakanan ng ating kababayan, ang dali pong sabihin, pag kinonfront ang China, para to sa fishermen. Pero anong effect on the ground? Malilesen ba o madadagdagan yung harassment? Ano ba epekto sa fishermen na kumakain din ng bigas? Tataas ba ang presyo o hindi? So totoo po, hindi tayo magsusunod-sunuran na lang o hindi naman natin iintindihin kung ano ang pagkilos ng China. But it would also be foolish not to study history, not to study temperaments and actions, especially security concerns of superpower. Diba? Sabi nga ni Sun Tzu, know yourself and know your enemy. Diba? Even if you know yourself, kung hindi mo makilala ang enemy mo at hindi mo pag-aaralan ang pagkilos niya, hindi magiging purpose-driven. So the reason po that I support this resolution, especially with the wording, and let me read it, whereas the Department of Foreign Affairs is expected to continue holding dialogue with the Chinese government to push for recognition and respect of the Philippine sovereign rights over its EEZ and pursue the formulation of the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea based on international law and UNCLOS. And if such efforts are continuously ignored by China and the harassment of our fisherfolk, Navy, and Coast Guard persist, then we enumerate possible courses of action. The first reason I agree is because dialogue should always be there. No? We never hate our enemies. Pagka you hate your enemy, magiging emotional, baka ikaw ang magkamali. Samantalang klaro ang pag-iisip ng enemy mo. You hate their actions, you hate the sin. Ika nga, di ba? Biblically, you hate the sin, but you don't hate the sinner. Kasi if you hate the sinner, mawawala ang pagka-Christian mo, mawawala yung love your enemy. But of course, you hate the sin, no? So we hate the actions being taken against our fishermen, our Coast Guard, what we think, what we're sure of is baseless claims, no? In the West Philippine Sea. The second reason po is may if. So ibig sabihin, hindi natin pinoposasan o tinatalian ang ating pong National Task Force, ang ating pong Pangulo, ang ating pong mga diplomats. Hindi natin dinidiktakan, nor po hindi natin sila pinoposasan. So we're actually supporting and giving them, kumbaga po sa militar, binibigyan mo ng uniforme, tamang sweldo, binabalahan mo, at sinasabi mo, kayo mamili kung anong ammunition, kung anong weapons, di ba? Hindi yung sinasabi natin na kailangan close range lang yan, o kailangan artillery lang yan, no? And thirdly, because we're not here just to argue. We're here to win the argument. And winning the argument is not only securing our territory and sovereign rights. It's all ito po ang hindi maintindihan ng marami. Na we can win the argument insofar as tayo yung tama or we have the right, but because some of our neighbors have the might or that the superpowers have the might, they will not respect these decisions. And what happens? For example, oil and gas na kailangan natin, hindi natin mayu-utilize yan unless magka-consensus. Consensus either with China or consensus with the other powers of the other powers and superpowers, or better, a consensus with everyone. And some people even say na, sir, bakit natin kailangan kausapin ang China para gamitin kung ano sa atin? But let me remind them na sa UNCLOS po yan. Negotiation and cooperation is an essential part of the UNCLOS, no? So let me emphasize that, no? Tayo sa right, and yun po ang ating might. And I believe in the end po, no, as we seek God's kingdom and righteousness, the Bible says, everything shall be added unto you. Pag nandun tayo sa tama, di ba? Secondly po, protect. And we should move for fishermen to fish there, to enjoy the fisheries, their rights to fish there. We should enjoy the living and non-living resources there. We should have we should all, together with Vietnam, for example, protect the area there. No? Our Senate President came from UPLB. Ang unang tinuro doon protection talaga, di ba? Yung environment, no? Hindi lang yung use and abuse of our natural resources. And lastly nga, yung argument natin, purpose-driven. So yes, some of us wanted this resolution to, in a sense, be stronger. Some of us have a different definition of stronger. Some of us, like me, believe this is stronger. Some would not. But the point is, Mr. President, in saying we should go left or right, or we should move forward, or one step backwards, two steps forward, the Senate has proven again that we can employ wisdom and come together and agree. Maybe not 100%, but have a consensus. And ngayon po, na sobra po yung pagbabaha, may problema po tayo sa bigas, sa agrikultura, kailangan po natin ang lahat ng ating kababayan. And maybe, you know, in the spirit of dialogue, yes, we want to stay in the strongest terms to China. Please respect. We implore you, follow international law, the UNCLOS, the arbitral ruling, and respect our sovereignty and territorial rights. But at the same time, we can reach out and say, China, nakikiramay din po kami dahil grabe din po ang baha. At grabe din po ang hirap na dinadanas ng ating mga kapatid na Chinese. One of the harshest lockdown, lately na lang po sila nag-open up. Yes, they were first to cope with the pandemic. Grabe po ang mga baha. So in the same manner po na sila nakiramay ang mga baha. So in the same manner po na sila nakiramay sa mga bagyong dumanas dito at in the same manner po that we can continue our relationship people to people. They offered joint military drills. They offered also po so we can also do the same, Mr. President. Confidence building muna, no? So let me stop there, Mr. President, but let me ask, with your permission, no, maybe to speak at a future time or an extended discussion on this. Because I do believe, Mr. President, two things. Number one, at the appropriate time, wag po ngayon kasi bumabagyo, dapat mag-focus po talaga tayo sa relief at rehabilitation. Bumabagyo hindi lang dito, pero pati sa China, pati sa Vietnam, no? And I also believe, Mr. President, pag hindi nga to tumigil, may role ang Senate not only to move, but also to educate people. And although we may disagree here, these disagreements actually give people more information and allows them to make an informed choice. So I will stop where the Senate President commented, sabi ng Pulse Asia, 9 out of 10 Filipinos want the Chinese out of Philippine territory. Sabi ko nga, dapat yan 10 out of 10. So kung meron tayong 10% na kailangan pang lapitan, i-educate, pakinggan, baka naman sila mag-educate sa atin, kailangan po natin gawin yon. So again, Mr. President, congratulations, thank you, and I hope we will continue this discussion. And I hope, no, even the disinformation na kumakalat, for example, I mentioned, parating pinapaulit-ulit na mawawala yung claim natin. Hindi po totoo yun. Iba po yung prescription, iba po sa local na court, iba po sa international sa international law, no? But I am confident that the DFA, during the time of President Aquino, during the time of President Duterte, and now, and even during the time of President Cory, President Erap, President Arroyo, and President Ramos, no, is doing what they can and has pushed, diba, for the protection of our rights. So again, congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Senate President, and to our dear
Thank you.
colleagues.
Thank you to our distinguished colleague, Senator Alan Cayetano, and thank you for your very important inputs that you gave yesterday. Being a former Secretary of Foreign Affairs, we of course weigh heavily on your inputs as well. Thank you.
Mr. President.
Yes, Majority
Yeah.
Floor Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, my name was mentioned by the good gentleman from Taguig and Pateros about the situation that we are in right now in my beloved province, the province of Bulacan. I was there this morning, Mr. President, in Kalumpit, in Paumbong, and Hagonoy, Bulacan, Mr. President. And I'd like to just state for the record, Mr. President, and the records will bail me out. since 2016. Since 2016, Mr. President, my first year as a member of this August chamber, I have raised these concerns, Mr. President, in every budget deliberation when it was then Senator Lauren Legarda chairing the Senate Committee on Finance. We talk about it. Lastly, Mr. President, last year, Mr. President, when we were deliberating the budget of DPWH, the NR et al., Mr. President, Senator Sani Angara, together with Senator Alan Cayetano and other members of this August chamber, I raised this particular problem of flooding in Bulacan, Mr. President. This year alone, Mr. President, there's about 183 billion pesos of funding. 183 billion pesos for flood control in DPWH alone, Mr. President. In Bulacan, it's 1.7 billion, Mr. President. And unfortunately, most, if not all, of our towns in our beloved province are all submerged in waters. Mr. President, in all the areas that I went to this morning, sa Paumbong po, kasama natin si Mayora Mary Ann Marcos. Sa Hagonoy po, kasama natin si Mayora Manlapas, si Mayor Fem doon sa Kalumpit. Lahat po yung tatlong towns na yun, Mr. President, ang Hagonoy, isa sa pinakamalaking towns, Mr. President. Lahat, walang exemption, lahat ng barangay submerged into waters.
My God.
Mr. President, if you see on social media what's happening inside our very own, the pride of Bulacan, the Barasoing Church, Mr. President, nagkakasal ho kahapon, if I'm not mistaken, or 2 days ago. At hanggang ngayon, nandun pa rin yung mga tubig, Mr. President. Ganun pa rin yung baha. Mr. President, clearly, I have been in existence for more than 4 decades, Mr. President. Birthday ko na ho bukas. Pare-pareho pa rin ang sinasabi ko sa Bulacan. Hindi pa rin maayos ang ating flood control system. Wala pa rin tayong maayos na programa at papaanong i-address ang sitwasyon ng baha sa ating bayan, sa buong Pilipinas, Mr. President. Yung pong unang taon natin dito sa Senado, Mr. President, we asked the DPWH about this, and they said they cannot do anything unless we come up with a feasibility study. So the feasibility study, inisponsoran din natin, humingi tayo ng pondo noon, Mr. President. It took us 2 years bago matapos yung feasibility study. Nung natapos yung feasibility study, hindi naman ini-implement yung feasibility study, Mr. President. Ngayon, sinasabi may mga kulang, may mali. Sabi ni Governor Fernando kanina, kasama natin, kasama din niya si Governor Garcia ng Bataan, Governor Pineda ng Pampanga. Lahat sila nagsasabing kulang at wala talaga yung pong master plan, Mr. President. Ganun na lang po, Ginoong Pangulo. Pagka tinrit mo yung isang town, inayos mo, yung kabilang town naman, babahain. Ganon din ho yung probinsya. Pag tinrit mo yung isang probinsya, hindi mo ginalaw yung isang probinsya, sa kanila naman pupunta yung tubig, Mr. President. So muli, Mr. President, kailangan natin magkaroon ng konkreto at integrated flood management program. Maling-mali, Mr. President, yung mga sinasabi, even the response of PDRRMO, Mr. President, they were saying 100,000 families are affected in Bulacan. Dun lang po sa Hagonoy kanina, tinignan ko yung listahan, pamilya lang, Mr. President, 47,000 families in Hagonoy alone. So mali din po itong mga records nito, no, itong mga datos na binibigay sa atin. Nakakalungkot po, Mr. President, dahil pa-worsen ang dilubyo ng baha na tumatama sa ating bayan, lalo na ho sa aming mahal na probinsya ng Bulacan. Mr. President, kailangan din magkaroon ng isang malinaw na polisiya tungkol sa pagpapakawala ng tubig sa mga dams. Napag-usapan namin kanina ni Senator Legarda itong usapin na ito, Mr. President. 4 na dekada na hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin alam kung paano i-implement yung protocols sa pagpapakawala ng tubig sa dam. Kung kailan yung mataas na yung tubig, dun magpapakawala. Ay alam naman ho nilang darating yung bagyo. Alam naman nilang maraming tubig yung tatama dito sa isang particular area, lalo na sa isang probinsya. Pangatlo, Ginoong Pangulo, mismo ang Pangulo nagsabi na prioridad itong pagtatayo ng Department of Water. And for this purpose, Mr. President, we filed Senate Bill number 2013, also known as the National Water Act. Mahalaga po ito at tingin ko, napaka-importante na matakil natin ito sa lalong madaling panahon. Buti na lang binanggit ng Pangulo na ito'y prioridad niya kahit hindi kasama doon sa naunang list of measures, Mr. President. And lastly, Mr. President, we filed Senate Resolution number 693, a resolution directing the appropriate committee, at ito po'y na-refer na sa Committee on Public Works sa pangunguna ni Senator Bong Revilla. Nag-usap na rin po kami na sa lalong madaling panahon magkaroon ng pagdinig para makita ho talaga natin. Kasi Ginoong Pangulo, isang bagyo lang itong tumama sa atin ngayon. Sa probinsya ng Bulacan, 700 to 800 million po yung damage. Isang bagyo pa lang po ito. So imagine, Mr. President, kung ang average ay 20 bagyo ang pumapasok sa atin at ginagastos natin yung itong mga programa natin ng ganito lang, again, 183 billion, DPWH alone, hindi pa kasama yung ginagastos ng DENR o ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan to look into this management of our water and flood control programs, Mr. President. Sinasayang natin ang budget ng ating bayan. Kaya Ginoong Pangulo, muli, I know this is just a manifestation, but I am calling my colleagues. Alam ko yung ilang mga kasamahan po natin dito, nagbigay na ng ayuda at tulong. May mga ilan, sinabi sa akin ng mga mayors po doon na pupunta sila. Nagpapasalamat po tayo, pero ang kailangan talagang tulong ay pangmatagalang tulong, Mr. President. Ito mga binanggit natin ay malaking tulong para tuluyan at permanenteng matugunan ang problema ng baha sa lalawigan ng Bulacan at sa karatig probinsya ng Central Luzon at sa ating buong bayan. Maraming salamat po, Ginoong Pangulo.
Maraming salamat, Majority Leader.
Mr. President.
Mr. President,
May I just-
gentleman from Taguig Pateros also seeking the floor. May I move that he be
It's a
recognized?
motion, Mr. President.
Cayetano's recognized.
Mr. President, may I move that his manifestation also be given to the
Proper committee.
Committee on Public Works since nandun na yung resolution. But since our Senate President Pro Tem passed by, I remember she chaired a hearing years ago. Was that Sendong, yung massive na baha? And I remember while she was chairing that was years ago, no? Ang natuklasan natin dun sa dams, di ba, na partly it's for power generation, partly for irrigation, partly for water needs of Metro Manila, but natuklasan nung hearing na yon, which was led by Senator Loren Legarda, is that may flood control part na hindi tinuloy ng gobyerno, hindi ginawa. And this was more than 10 years ago or 10 years ago. So, the good chairperson might remember the details, but baka pwede pong isama yan sa titignan kasi same areas ang binahan nung time na yon. Tarlac, Pampanga, and Bulacan. So I yield to the Senate President Pro Tem, but that was such an important hearing, and I thought that after that maayos na lahat eh.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. President, with your permission.
Yes, our distinguished
Majority Leader.
President.
Yes, I wish to be recognized. Thank you. Thank you to Senator Cayetano for bringing that to the floor because we were talking about it with Senator Villanueva. The floods in Bulacan are not just brought about by the frequent and incessant rains. They are also caused by the release of water from the dams. And how many dams are there in Bulacan? Angat, Bustos, and Ipo. Yes. And as early as 2007 and 2009 during Ondoy, Senator Cayetano is correct, we held a hearing here in this very session hall where we spoke about the need for a Doppler radar, which was not yet available with Pag-asa then, but which has since been provided Pag-asa. And next, for a operations manual of dam protocols of dams which are for water source and dams which are for power generation. Which brings me to the issue of dams. We need dams, as I said, for water, collection, pag-imbak ng tubig, big or small, and for generation of energy. But which came first, the dams or the communities? When you build a dam, obviously, environment impact assessment, environment clearance certificate are secured. And of course, dams have to release water. Otherwise, it will burst. So hindi naman kasalanan yan ng mga dam operators o owners ng dam. Pero kailangan ina-update nila ang kanilang mga protocol. At kailangan din susundin natin ang land use. Kung saan magpapalaya po ng tubig, ay dapat ay hindi naman dun gumagawa ng gusali, ng mga bahay, ng eskwelahan, ng barangay hall, o kung ano bang gamit pang tao na titirhan dahil yan po ang dadaluyan ng tubig pag magpapalaya ng tubig dahil parte po yan ng dam protocol. Kaya sa ginagawa ko pong resolusyon, base sa aking 2009 sa Ondoy at 2000, after 2010, 11 or 12 sa Sendong na binanggit rin ni Senator Cayetano, ay mabibigyan po tayo ng liwanag kung ano ba ang dapat gawin. Ako po'y nakikiisa kay Senator Majority Leader Villanueva na nakatira sa Bulacan na magiging 40 years old na siya plus bukas ay ganyan pa rin ang nangyayari. Totoo po, dekada-dekada na. Kaya ang tatanungin natin, nauna ba yung dam? Nauna ba ang mga bahay na komunidad? Hindi pwedeng tanggalin ang dam. Hindi naman pwedeng paalisin ang mga tao. Ano ngayon ang science-based, risk-informed solution na hindi po mangyayari ito? Dahil maski wala pong bagyo, maski walang ulan, nagbabaha dahil sa pagpalaya ng tubig ng dam. Hindi lang po yan ang dahilan. Soil subsidence, ang pagbaba ng lupa dahil po sa over-extraction ng tubig. Sa dami pong gamit rin ng tubig sa iba't ibang pamamaraan, pag masyadong ginagamit ay buwaba pa po ang level ng tubig. So, we see sea level rise that can cause parts of Bulacan like Hagonoy to be submerged. At the same time, soil subsidence, ibig sabihin, buwababa ang lupa maski na hindi mo pa tinitake into consideration ang sea level rise, bababa. So tumataas ito, bababa ito. Tapos, yung hindi dapat lagyan ng gusali o bahay, ay may bahay na, ay may komunidad na. Pero nung ginawa yung ECC at binigay yung ECC at EIA nung ginagawa yung dam, dapat bakanteng lugar yan. Eh paano kung naging fish pond na? Paano naging komunidad na? Paano naging kalsada na? Paano na yan? Maliban dyan, marami rin mga dapat open spaces o mga fish ponds ay baka lang na-reclaim na. O baka yung mga fish ponds ay na-reclaim na, naging lupa na, ay naging mga bahay-bahay na. So, ito po ang kadahilanan. Dahil saan nga pupunta ang tubig pag walang dadaluyan yung tubig? So, base po sa ating investigasyon na resolusyon, ay hindi po sapat na nandyan ang DPWH, pero kailangan din nila bigyan ng breakdown ang kanilang mga flood control na tinatawag at siguro magsangguni rin tayo sa mga scientifico, let's say, ng University of the Philippines, pati mga Marine Science Institute. I-research ko po yung aking mga hiningan ng abiso o ng expert opinion noong 2009 at 2012 sa aking mga hearing. Nag-conduct rin ako maybe 2015 ng lahat ng water agencies ng gobyerno, those under DPWH, those under DNR, those under Office of the President, because there are more than 20 water agencies na dapat ipagsama-sama din ang kanilang mga mandato. Ano ba ang kanilang ginagawa? So isama na rin po natin yan sa bansa na nangangailangan ng tubig, sa bansang nakapaligid sa tubig na arkipelago ay lumulubog sa tubig at hindi naman nagagamit sa tamang paraan. Having said that, Mr. President, I just wanted to give my opinion because my name was raised and because I wanted to give what I know from my, if I may say, vast experience in climate adaptation and mitigation. And I'm glad that the Climate Change Commission was here before because we will ask the province of Bulacan. We will ask every LGU of Bulacan, kayo ba ho ay nakasumite na ng LCCAP? Ano ba tong LCCAP? Local Climate Change Adaptation Plan. Kung kayo po ay nagsumite ng LCCAP, kasama ba dyan ang mga hazards, vulnerabilities at mga risk? Iba po yung hazard, iba po yung risk, iba po yung vulnerability. I am not here to lecture because I can see Senator Poe will also deliver a very important speech on food security. I just wanted to bring to the floor the importance of water, the importance of livable communities in sustainable cities and provinces. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And
Thank you.
My dear Majority Floor Leader, if you may, I know it's self-serving for you to make the motion, but may I suggest that we move your manifestation together with the manifestation given by Senator Alan and Senator Lauren to the Committee of Senator Revilla, which is the Public Works Committee, so that we can act on it. I know that problem since 2016, we've been
I
talking
sound like a
about
broken
this.
record, Mr. President.
It's like my airport, it hasn't been finished yet. So in this case, in your case, it's your flooding has not been
I so
taken
move,
action
Mr.
on.
President. I so
There's a motion, so there being no objection, and with the permission, of course, of the Majority Leader.
Thank you.
That the manifestation be taken up to the Committee on Public Works. And you know, we all sympathize with you, distinguished Majority Floor Leader. I saw the videos you sent. We watch it in the news. Talaga kawawa-kawawa yung ating mga kababayan sa Bulacan. There must be some sort of master plan. If Amsterdam can keep the ocean away from flooding the city of Amsterdam, if other countries can do it, then we should be able to do it once and for all na hindi kayo mababaha na. And tama po sinabi ni Senator Lauren Regarda. We have a problem of efficiency of use of water. Marami tayong tubig. Pagdating ng rainy season, punong-puno tayo ng tubig, nababa yung mga bayan ng Bulacan at sa iba't ibang parte ng Pilipinas. Pero pag tag-init, wala naman po tayong tubig. Sana gawin natin ehemplo ang ginagawa nila sa Estados Unidos at Europa, kung saan talagang yung ulan dun sa kanila, isang buwan lang sa isang taon. At natatago po nila ang tubig in these large water impounding projects like Hoover Dam and even in Lake Tahoe and all these other big lakes where they deposit all the water, which is utilized even for agriculture in California and farms in California and in the deserts of Nevada. So sabi ko, tayo, wala. Pag ulan, runoff, baha. Pag init, wala tayong tubig. So I think tama din na ipasa na natin yung Department of Water ni Senator Grace po and many of us here. There's yours truly filed also, and together with Senator Joel, so that there can be a master plan. But for the meantime, we appeal to the DPWH. Maraming taga Bulacan dyan, undersecretary. Hindi ko na babanggitin kung sino. Pero marami tayong mga kaibigan na taga Bulacan, undersecretary. Alam naman siguro nila ano nangyayari sa probinsya ninyo. Sana ma-actionan po nila sa lalong madaling panahon. Dapat priority number 1 po sa kanila yan.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Just
Mr.
would like to thank our dear colleague, Senator Alan Peter Cayetano, Senator Lauren Ligarda, and our dear colleagues present here today supporting our advocacy and call. Thank you very much, Mr. President and President Subiri, for that motion. Mr. President, I am not an expert. I always defer to the wisdom of experts when it comes to flood control programs, etc. Tama po yung binanggit ni Senator Ligarda on the aspect of dam protocols. And hindi natin kino-contest yun, Mr. President. Ang isang tinitingnan lang po natin, Mr. President, again, there's 183 billion pesos for just 1 year budget for DPWH for flood control program. And yet, Mr. President, it's not getting better. It's getting worse, Mr. President. And I have been talking like a broken record for the past so many years in this August chamber. I hope, Mr. President, na this time around may gawin. Kasi nung last budget hearing, binanggit ko na po ito na this will happen. And it's still happening, Mr. President. Thank you again,
Thank
dear
you.
colleagues.
We'd also like to hear just a short manifestation from the chairman of the committee.
Mr. President, we share the sentiments of the gentleman from Bulacan, our majority floor leader. Make sure na ma-hear natin kaagad dito as soon as possible.
Maraming salamat.
Sabi ko nga kung kailan available ang ating birthday celebrant, Senator Joel, daw natin i-set yung date that hindi tayo titigil. Alam natin yung problema talaga sa baha at yan ay problema ng lahat, no? Kung saan matapat ang bagyo, ma-norte o ma-south, kumbaga doon talaga babaha. Kaya ito'y dapat aksyonan.
Yes.
Yung honest to goodness flood control program ng ating gobyerno. At hindi yung talagang nakakalugmok, Mr. President, talagang nakakalungkot. Pagka dumating yung tubig, talagang baha ng baha kung saan-saan. Kaya kailangan to magawa ng solusyon ng problema sa baha.
Pati sa
So,
Bacoor yata. minsan
Yes,
nababa-
yes, Mr. President.
Cavite.
Even in Cavite, especially Bacoor is the catch basin of Cavite, no? Kaya yan ang dapat tugunan. Kaya Mr. President, I'll make sure na ma-schedule natin ito as soon as possible. Siguro by
Next week.
next week.
Next week.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just would like to put on record that since
Maraming
day
salamat,
one
Senator Bong.
that we filed the resolution, Senator Bong Revilla, the chairman of the Committee on Public Works, already act on it, Mr. President. So we appreciate his efforts and interest, Mr. President, in finding ways and means to address this problem. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, we'd like to recognize a distinguished colleague.
in line, yeah,
The chairman of the Committee on Public Works and, Public Services and the chairman of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Grace Poe is recognized.
thank you, Mr. President. This is initially a privileged speech, but because of the discussions that we've had, and it's not very lengthy, it also is actually a manifestation about what's going on. So Senator Alan Cayetano raised the issue about the possible crisis that we might be facing when it comes to the importation of rice, as well as what's happening in Bulacan, which I sympathize with. Bulacan apparently was once the top producer of rice in the country. So definitely until now, they still supply a big portion of our food supply. So, Mr. President, ngayong hapon ay inihain ko sa hapag ng Senado ang pandaigdigang issue ng seguridad ng pagkain sa bansa. Partikular na ang paborito ng lahat, ang bigas, ang kanin. This issue affects our nation's gut and imperils the food on our plates. If left unaddressed, it will raise the cost of our meals, the anger in our bellies, and the hunger in our streets. Our GDP may have grown to 6.4% in the first quarter of 2023, but it looks like our GNP, gutom na Pilipino, also continues to grow. Ngayon pa lang, marami na sila. Ayon sa latest SWS survey, 3 sa bawat 10 Pilipino ay food poor or hindi kayang bumili ng sapat na pagkain. An additional 3 out of 10 are near food poor or have barely enough. Sa makatuwid, mas marami ang gutom kaysa sa busog. Anong mangyayari sa kanila kapag nagpatuloy ang pagbaba ng supply ng bigas sa pandaigdigang merkado? Lalong-lalo na ngayon, binabaha ang maraming lugar, hindi lamang sa Pilipinas, kundi sa ibang bansa. The issue I'm referring to is India's recent decision just last July 20 to halt all exports of non-basmati rice to the global market. The ban happened after heavy monsoon rains in India led to a decline in supply and a spike in local prices. Hindi man tayo bumibili sa India ng bigas, maraming bumibili doon sa kanila. Kaya tataas ang presyo kahit dun sa mga suppliers natin na Vietnam and Thailand. Watch
Tonight,
this news.
India's ban on exporting different varieties of non-basmati rice, triggering panic buying across the U.S. People stocking up, clearing shelves and waiting in long lines as many stores from coast to coast limit sales and hike prices, in some cases more than twice as high.
There is no rice in the stores, basically. After the ban, it was so crowded. Some stores, like there are people waiting for like 100, 200 people waiting in the lane.
Experts say the culprit, climate change. The Indian government announcing the ban after torrential rains and flooding devastated crops in the northern region of the country, sending prices in India soaring, citizens paying nearly 12% more. Indian officials say it's a measure taken to ensure supply domestically and keep costs at bay, but it's a move felt across the world.
Something as far away as the monsoon in India will affect your grocer in your hometown here in the United States.
India is the largest exporter of rice, shipping 40% of the world's supply to the more than 3 billion who depend on the grain as part of their daily diet.
But it's also a key grain used in many of the items that we eat. It's a key ingredient. That's going to have a ripple effect. We will see prices increase as we, go to the grocer. We'll see prices increase when we go out to eat at the restaurants. You will not live your life without, being affected by this.
The rice ban coming days after Russia pulled out of the grain deal with Ukraine, preventing millions of tons of food from leaving Ukrainian ports and reaching the rest of the world, bringing food supply in some countries to a breaking point.
Some will go hungry, some will starve, many may die.
An urgent warning from the United Nations as the devastating consequences of war and climate change are felt across the globe.
Tom, experts say we could be feeling the effects of the rice ban for several months, if not into the next growing season. But if next year's crops are also hit by severe weather, we could be seeing these shortages for even longer.
Hindi naman po natin masisisi ang India sa kanilang desisyon. May obligasyon silang unahin ang kapakanan ng 1.4 billion na mamamayan. Ngunit may obligasyon rin tayo sa 113 million na mga Pilipino, lalo na sa 3.4 million na mga kabataan at mag-aaral na umaasa sa feeding program ng gobyerno. Kapag sila ay nagkulang sa timbang, tayo ang may pagkukulang. Here are some numbers to chew on. Because of the only rice programming in our genes, the average Filipino consumes 118.81 kilos or over 2 sacks of rice a year. Hindi lahat ng ito ay galing sa ating mga palayan. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, we are only 81.5% rice self-sufficient. Ibig sabihin, 8 sa bawat 10 butil ng bigas ay galing sa Pilipinas. Ang natitirang 2 butil inaangkat mula sa ibang bansa. The reason for such high import dependence are too many to discuss here, but simply put, our agricultural sector is not blessed with either good geography or governance. In total, we imported 3.79 million metric tons of rice last year. Of that amount, 3.16 million metric tons were sourced from Vietnam. The next largest import partners were Myanmar, Pakistan, and Thailand. From India, we imported a mere 10,045 metric tons, but this does not exclude us from the collateral impact of their decision. The decline in global supply from the biggest rice exporter is expected to cause a spike in global rice prices because of speculation. 55.4 million metric tons of rice were traded globally in 2022. Shipments from India accounted for 22 million or 40% of global supply. Their total rice export exceeded those of Thailand, Vietnam, Pakistan, and the United States combined. So can you imagine the price now after India will stop exports? As it is, Vietnam, which supplies more than 90% of the Philippines' rice imports, already increased its price to $600 per metric ton compared to the previous $500 per metric ton. A decline in supply will always increase the price to meet the demand. It also further exacerbates the global rice shortage. A report by Fitch Solution estimates that the global rice shortfall for 2023 is 8.7 million metric tons, the largest deficit since 2004. Vietnam, in particular, is planning to ease its rice imports to 4 million metric tons by 2030. President Marcos intends to pursue a rice import deal with India. In his words, I think I can make a deal with India. Baka meron tayong mapakiusapan doon. But especially with what's happening now, no doubt the first to bang on India's doors will be the immediate rice trading partners such as Bangladesh and Nepal. Alam mo, ang ating presidente ay marami ng trabaho. Lahat ng problema ng bansa ay nakapatong sa kanyang mga balikat. Siguro, kailangan din niya ngayon ng tulong, lalong-lalo na sa Department of Agriculture, na talagang nakatutok dito. Let's also plug our leaky irrigation system. According to NEDA, we use about 68 billion cubic meters of water annually to water our crops. Other countries use only 52 billion. Either our technology is inefficient or corruption is proficient. We should be climate proofing and disaster proofing our rice fields. We need to adopt variants which can survive the drier days to come. Water impounding facilities as discussed by our Senate President. At sana, yung sinabi ng ating Pangulo sa kanyang SONA ay magkatotoo na nahahabulin ang mga agricultural smugglers at dapat sila ay ipakulong. We also look forward to the 2024 proposed budget of the Department of Agriculture. We hope the agri-budget will not only get bigger but be spent faster and wiser on the things with our rice, which our rice farmers need to succeed. Nagsimula sa sibuyas, pati asukal, ngayon naman ay bigas. Pinangakuan tayo ng 20 pesos per kilo pero mukhang mahihirapan tayong lalong-lalo na sa mga nangyayari sa mundo ngayon. Nasa 36 per kilo ngayon ang pinakamura. Sana hindi tayo abutin ng taggutom ng walang maayos na plano. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much. And may I, Majority Leader, just
Yes.
make a comment? You know, I'm an agriculturist, so medyo it frustrates me to no end what's happening. We all know that food security is national security. The inability to feed our people is a national security issue. Kaya pumigil na yung India. Kung ganyan na po yung rioting sa India, no choice sila. They really have to save their own rice stocks. But we have an opportunity to help the president. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'll make a suggestion to the president. We can have rice producing zones. Alam ko, Nueva Ecija, Central Luzon, that's a large rice producing zone. Sa Mindanao, parts of Bukidnon and parts of Mindanao are rice producing zones. We can even designate farm areas. Maguindanao has a very good possible rice producing zone. And in the Visayas as well. The president now can delegate. I want to make the suggestion to the president, my dear colleagues. Delegate his assistant secretaries and his undersecretaries na sila ang bahala dito sa isang lugar na ito. You give them accountability, like the soldier. You tell the soldier, your company takes care of this area, make sure it is rid of all these bad elements. Pag hindi, floating kayo, tanggal kayo. Sana gawin ni Presidente yan, sa dami niyang ASEC dyan, directors and USECs. Sabihin niya, USEC, Panganiban, ikaw na, best friend, alam ko best friend ni Senator Risa yan. USEC, Panganiban, ikaw in charge sa Central Luzon. Pag hindi mo iniayos yung rice production doon, tanggal ka sa pagka-undersecretary. And then of course, to back it up with the funding, the modern equipment. Hindi na yung Carabao. We'll now use rotavators. We'll now use mini tractors. We'll now give them hybrid seeds or yung, not even hybrid, yung, kung hindi nila kaya hybrid seeds, yung mas mura na seed material. And then fertilizer. Ang kagandahan ng bigas, mga kaibigan, mga kapatid na nakikinig po na yun, ating mga colleagues, is it's a 3-month crop. So if we're suffering now, if we work hard enough, 3 months from now, we can feed our country. But obviously, kung pinabayaan ng gobyerno yan, we will never feed our country. So the president has an opportunity. Before December comes, if we work hard now and he follows my suggestion, which I will suggest tomorrow evening, is accountability of his people. Use his people and make them accountable so that hindi sila gumalaw at walang production itong mga regions na ito, di dapat tanggal sila sa trabaho nila. Naawa din ako sa Pangulo because baka binobola-bola lang sila ng departamento. All is green, all is good. And this is also a policy, unfortunately, that we have taken, that every crop that we need for the country, kung kulang import. So nangyayari, import na lang tayo. That's why we passed the rice tarification law. My fear when we passed the rice tarification law was, if all countries held onto the rice stocks, we will still be held hostage because we do not have a strong enough agricultural industry to be able to feed our people, to be able to feed our people. So I'm with you, Senator Grace. I'm so happy that you raised this issue. You gave me a topic to discuss with the president tomorrow. As you know, he's inviting us all for dinner. So I will make that a topic tomorrow for discussion and may hopefully be able to come up with a rice producing zones rice-producing zones where the Agriculture Department nakatutok with full inputs and full inputs and incentives given to the farmers so that they can produce double what they're producing now. So thank you very much, Madam Grace and Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. President, I share the sentiments of a lot of our colleagues here, especially your sentiments and the sentiments of Senator Grace Po. I just remember again, Mr. President, our salt industry, 93% of the requirement of this country is being imported. We are an pelagic country, Mr. President. I mean, it's no-brainer for us to produce salt. And thank God we are about to pass a Salt Revitalization Act, hopefully next week, if not this week, Mr. President. And I know, Mr. President, that the manifestation of Senator Grace Po earned the interest of every member of the Senate. And so I will also make a motion, Mr. President, that her manifestation, together with the manifestation of our dear Senate President Zubiri and our colleagues, be also referred to the Committee on Agriculture, Food and Agrarian Reform, and Committee on Economic Affairs. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion is approved.
Mr. President, at this juncture, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2165 under Committee Report number 64. This is the bill on automatic income classification of local government units. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we close the period of interpellations and debate. And on that note, I now move to open the period of amendments. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion is approved.
Mr. President, may we recognize the distinguished sponsor of the measure, Senator J.V. Ejercito, for his amendments, Mr.
Our
President.
distinguished colleague, Chairperson of the Committee on Local Government is recognized, Senator J.V. Erst.
Yes, Mr. President. There being no committee
Mr.
amendments.
President, there being no committee amendments, may I move that we open the period of individual amendments? I so move, Mr.
We
President.
close the period of committee amendments, open the period of individual amendments.
Yes, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
There
I
be
now
no
move that we
objection.
recognize the distinguished sponsor, Senator J.V. Ejercito.
Our distinguished sponsors recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. First Amendment on page 1, line 11, insert a subsection A, the following. A, actual growth rate refers to the percentage increase in the aggregate annual regular income for provinces, cities, and municipalities from the last income reclassification and renumber section accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, amendments approved.
On page 5, line 16, after the word barangay, insert the following, provided that income ranges herein shall be adjusted and updated by the Secretary of Finance every 3 years based on the standards provided in the succeeding session. The justification being this amendment establishes a definitive standard to guide the Secretary in adjusting and updating income brackets. I assume, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the, Minority Floor Leader is recognized.
Mr. President, this is actually now the, I think the provision which provides the legal basis for the delegation of power to the Secretary of Finance. I know that there is still a subsequent amendment, but I have an issue, Mr. President, on
Maybe we can table this motion.
on that policy decision that we need to delegate this power to the Secretary of Finance. So I'm registering my objection, Mr. President. Table muna.
Can we table the motion and act on the other motions that are acceptable to the Minority Floor Leader?
Mr. President,
Or it will affect.
I have seen the
rest of
the next amendment. It will now be the attempt to provide the standards on the delegation of power. So I will raise the same objection, Mr. President.
I'll ask for to suspend session for 1 minute.
The minority leader pala is not.
Oh, sorry. Minority leader is missing. Session suspended.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status is that the minority leader is objecting to the individual amendments being proposed by the sponsor, Mr. President. May we ask the sponsor again to repeat, Mr. President, the particular amendment?
Yes, Mr. President, I was on the second amendment, on page 5, line 16, provided that the income ranges herein shall be adjusted and updated by the Secretary of Finance every 3 years based on the standards provided in the succeeding section. The justification being that this amendment establishes a definitive standard to guide the Secretary in adjusting and updating income brackets. That's the second amendment, Mr. President.
Well, so just so that our
Yes,
colleagues will
Minority
be informed. This does not provide the standard yet, Mr. President. This is the legal
Yes,
basis for the delegation. I think the succeeding amendment is
Yes,
will provide the standard. So
Yes, so the third amendment, Mr.
yes.
President.
So the objection, Mr. President, is based on a policy question on whether we should delegate this power, which is legislative in nature, to the Secretary of the Department of Finance. The stand of this representation is that there is no need to delegate this power because even without this power, the bill will be complete and it will be a relevant bill, Mr. President, able to achieve its objective of updating the income classification and even enhancing it, Mr. President. And then, the policy position is that let us retain this power with the legislature because once we delegate this, this will be the last time that we will be seeing a bill of this nature because everything will now be in the power of the executive, even the framework. Kasi, this is an income classification of LGUs and we are providing for the framework and we are delegating the power to even change or modify the framework to the Secretary of Finance. So that's my basic reasoning, Mr. President, why this representation is objecting to the amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
May we
And
seek also
of course,
may we also seek the explanation of the good gentleman, the sponsor, why there's a delay on the classification?
Yes, Mr. President, the real rationale of this measure is for efficiency, no? So that also Congress can already concentrate on other matters because actually we are not delegating these powers to the Finance Secretary, but rather it will be based on parameters like annual based on ARI, the annual regular income or the ARI, the regional domestic gross domestic product, and also inflation. So these are the formulas that wherein the Secretary of Finance will base the computation. So actually, it's really not delegation, but more of computation and implementation. Mr. President,
Just to
because
clarify, we discussed this earlier inside. What you're trying to say is because it takes a very long time for Congress to pass legislation to reclassify this.
that is correct, Mr.
Now.
President. At because of inflation and it will be overtaken already, no? Because of inflation, a lot of LGUs, no, will there will come a time there will be a bottleneck already, no? Those in the third class will become second class, and a lot will become first class already. So we will just go back and make it parang ano, we will just rationalize based on the actual capability and financial standing of the LGUs. So
So
we
what you're trying to say is, under this new law that you're passing, with the permission of the gentlemen and ladies, is that we give now the authority to the DOF, the Secretary of Department of Finance, to reclassify the LGUs according to a set of guidelines
Yes, that is correct, Your Honor. There will be parameters.
and
Again,
parameters.
based on ARI, just to put it in record, the annual regular income, the regional gross domestic product, the GDP,
Yes.
and inflation. Before, in the old, before it was just based on ERA. But now we took into consideration inflation and regional GDP, Your Honor, Mr. President.
Okay, I think that's clear. Yes,
The,
Minority Leader?
the factors mentioned by the sponsor will be found in the next amendment.
That is
But
correct.
yes, Mr. So actually, Mr. President, this is really there's an opinion of the Department of Justice that this is a legislative power. So what we're doing is delegating the legislative power. So we have to do it carefully and in compliance with the Constitution. My main point, Mr. President, is it is really not necessary. I mean, ma-achieve talaga ang purpose. But it appears now that I think the delegation of legislative power is one of the objectives actually of the bill. So we will have a basic policy difference here, Mr. President. So I suggested to the DOF if they could look for wording to make the income ranges in the table or in the framework which we will be passing more resilient, which would last for, let's say, 5 to 7 years. But there was no result on my suggestion, and instead we have this delegation of legislative power. So I'm really convinced that this may be one of the objectives of the bill. So be it, Mr. President. So
Just for also for added information, Mr. President, Your Honor, these are the to pass the income classification in 1959, 1974, and 1987. The last one was 2009, but it was just a DOF initiative. So because of the tedious process of legislation, there would come a time that there will be bottlenecks already. Because
backlogs.
Backlogs, yes,
Backlogs,
Mr. President.
All right. And I believe Senator Tolentino was raising his hand, the distinguished gentleman, expert in LGU affairs, being former mayor of
Yes. Yes,
Tagaytay
thank you, Mr.
City.
President.
Beautiful Tagaytay City.
Coming from a lengthy conversation with some guests to the good sponsor as well as the minority leader. If we make Section 5 as worded, this is not yet an amendment being proposed. Recommendatory powers of the Secretary of Finance. Secretary of Finance, in consultation with the various leagues, shall recommend to Congress the income ranges and herein provided, and assist Congress. Will that sound acceptable and palatable to the minority leader? So and likewise to the proponent, because now the Secretary of Finance will be involved, but again, it will not be a direct delegation, alleged delegation of legislative powers. Pwede ba yun? Ganon? Nandun pa rin yung Kongreso. And the
Should,
good sponsor.
yes, Mr. President, should we consider favorably the suggestion of the good senator from Tagaytay, who is our expert in international law, local governance, who is the only doctor in the house.
Three-time master
doctor,
degree
Mr.
holder.
President. So
Three-time
if
master.
should we consider that favorably, I think it will render the pending amendment on the floor unnecessary because it is actually a solution. It's the Secretary of Finance will be recommending the changes. So the idea of the good senator from Tagaytay, who is an expert,
I am not.
actually,
I am not.
in a lot of matters, the expert in a lot of matters, actually conforms to my position, Mr. President. So
The expert
I
is
would
the
be
son of the
amenable.
father of the local government code.
Maybe we can ask, maybe with the permission of the body,
Can we
have
have
a
a minute
1 minute suspension so that they may confer with the sponsor. Session suspended. Yes, Senator Cayetano.
With the permission of the gentleman on the floor, just to assist, just some thoughts, manifestation lang, no? And I think you would know this history. Once upon a time, even ice plants had to get franchise from Congress. But at a certain point in time, Congress decided that, everything is important, but we can trust this group to be able to follow the standard and give a franchise to this ice plant.
Yes.
Wages is one of the very, very important. In fact, it's existential, di ba?
Yes.
Pero we delegated that to wage boards, but to the suggestion of both Chairman Tolentino and our minority leader about the powers of Congress. If we give this power to the Secretary of Finance, my understanding is, just like the wage boards, we can still pass it anytime.
Yes.
So meaning, you have the wage board which will be functioning regularly.
Yes.
And
It will
then,
not stop us from passing a
yes,
legislative
Congress
franchise.
coming in
Yes.
at extraordinary times when we feel that the delegated power has either not done, is doing it not that well, or whatever, even though there are standards, no? So in the same manner, the Senate President is pushing for a legislative wage hike sa hirap po na itaas ang sweldo ng ating kababayan kahit na may regional wage board, di ba? Ganito ang pagkaintindi ko dito. Because I think it would be fair to ask the Senate, kung hindi natin to papasa, do we commit na tayo ipapasa? Ang problema po, bicameral tayo eh.
Yes.
We cannot bind the House to pass this reclassification. So in my view, pwedeng i-reconcile yung questions ng minority leader, and I see the point of the sponsor that at least sure na may magre-reclassify. But sa akin naman po, it's just some input, and I do agree that it is the minorities leader duty to make sure that we don't keep giving away our powers until wala na tayong gagawin dito, no? But given the data that given ng ni Senator JV na very sporadic talaga, years bago po ma-reclassify. I do not know the opinion of Senator Jinggoy. He's not here right now. But I think he will also agree because he was also a mayor. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to put on record, and we have been talking about this with the Department of Finance officials, Mr. President. The law that we're about to pass is actually stricter, Mr. President, than the parameters being used by even the process being used by the wage boards, Mr. President. Because in this particular measure that we are discussing, defined po, Mr. President, yung parameters, defined din yung process. So I just want to put that on record. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Majority Leader. So there's the parliamentary status, I believe, Majority Leaders, that the minority leader objected to the amendment. Let's proceed to the next proceed.
Which is to
next
divide the
process.
House, Mr. President.
Yes. So, there being no objection to divide the House, may you make the proper motion? So the amendment, just for the record, the amendment of the distinguished gentleman from San Juan is that on page 5, line 16, after the word barangay, insert the following: provided the income ranges herein shall be adjusted and updated by the Secretary of Finance every 3 years based on the standards provided in the succeeding section. And there was an objection for the minority leader. The sponsor does not want to budge on his position, therefore let's divide the House. So
In favor.
those who are in favor of the objection, or the objection muna, the objection of Senator Pimentel, please raise his hand, his or her hand. I see two. Those who are in favor of the amendment to the distinguished chairman, please raise your hands.
Si Mama Bear.
Tumaas naman.
Okay. Therefore, the objection of Senator Coco Pimentel is lost. Please proceed with the amendment.
Yes, Mr. President, the third amendment on page 5, line 17 to 25.
Yeah, let me just repeat what I said. The objection is lost and the amendment is carried.
Yes.
So amendment is approved.
Thank
Please
you,
proceed.
Mr. President. The third amendment is on page 5, line 17 to 25, delete the entire section 5 and replace it with the following. Section 5, Administrative Authority of the Secretary of Finance. The Secretary of Finance, in consultation with the LGU leagues, shall have the authority to adjust the income ranges herein provided based on the actual growth rate of the annual regular income from the last income reclassification and undertake the regular income reclassification once every 3 years in order that the income classification of local government units may continue to conform with the prevailing economic conditions and the overall financial status of local governments, provided that the Secretary of Finance may consider inflation and gross regional domestic product in evaluating if an LGU has experienced prolonged economic shocks that may warrant retaining its current income classification. Provided further that the Secretary of Finance shall upgrade the income classification of an LGU if the LGU has shown growth in real per capita locally sourced revenue every year for the past 3 years. Mr. President, justification being that the proposed amendment was crafted and agreed upon by the Department of Finance and LGU leagues during a consultative meeting. This amendment clearly sets the basis for the adjustment of the income ranges and expressly provides that it shall be the growth rate of the annual regular income from the last income reclassification and taking into consideration inflation and gross regional domestic product. There's also proviso which the Secretary may use to further upgrade the income classification of LGUs to one step higher, which is the real positive growth of per capita locally sourced revenue of LGUs. I so move, Mr. President.
There is of course, the same manifestation from our Minority Floor Leader. We'd like to recognize our Minority Floor Leader.
Mr. President, this is now the amendment which carries out the delegation of power to the Secretary of Finance. Hopefully, I think that it is intended to be compliant with the Constitution. And we mentioned earlier that the delegation of legislative power should be complete and provide sufficient standards. So I believe, Mr. President, that this does not provide, this does not comply with the requirements of the Constitution, because from the reading of the amendment, the only standard I could see is actual growth rate of the annual regular income from the last income reclassification, Mr. President. So I object to the proposed amendment for not being compliant with the Constitution, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Well, Mr. President, we asked that we divide the House, Mr. President, considering that the proposal is denied by the sponsor, Mr. President.
Okay, those are in favor of the amendment of the distinguished Deputy Majority Leader, sponsor of the measure. Please raise your hands.
Objections?
Those are in favor of the amendment.
Tita G.
Amendment of, I just, binaliktad ko lang. Binaliktad ko lang. Those who are against, raise your hand. Thank you very much to our Minority Leader. Thank you. Senator Cayetano is recognized.
Can we just let the record reflect that we voted for the amendment because we feel it is compliant with the Constitution? No, so
Yes.
meaning we have a difference of opinion with the learned Minority Leader, and it will be now up to the courts if it is brought there. Kasi I
We will
just
place
want
on record,
the
yes.
record to reflect that it's not
Those
just
who
the
raised their hands.
majority
Yes.
outvoting the minority, but the majority believing it is compliant with the
Yes.
the Constitution and the decisions of the Supreme Court when it comes to valid or proper delegation, no,
Thank you.
of legislative powers.
Thank you for reminding us. We instruct the Secretary to take note of the last two votes, those who raised their hands in favor and those who raised against.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to Senator Cayetano. May we ask the The sponsor,
please
continue with the individual amendments, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President, the fourth amendment. Second to the last, on page 6, line 18 to 19, delete item D of section B of the bill. Justification, the reason for this amendment is anchored on equity and fairness. By removing the SSL restriction, the LGUs can better exercise their administrative autonomy to streamline their departments and organizational structure towards greater efficiency and responsiveness to the service delivery requirements of the LGU. In addition, this may also be a redundant restriction considering that the LGC has already provided a hard budget ceiling on personnel services, 45% for high-income class LGUs and 55% for low-income class LGUs. As long as these hard budget ceilings are not breached, the LGUs should be given the opportunity to use 100% of the salary standardization law as long as they are not breaching the PS limitations or the personal service limitations provided by the local government code. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the amendments approved.
Last amendment on page 8, line 8 to 10, delete the entire section 13 and replace it with the following. Section 13, repealing clause. Section 10 of RA number 11466 or the Salary Standardization Law of 2019 is hereby repealed. Any law, presidential decree, or issuance, executive order, letter of instruction, rule, or regulation inconsistent with the provisions of this act is hereby repealed or modified accordingly. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion of the distinguished sponsor, amendments approved.
That's all, Mr. President.
Majority Leader. Senator Tolentino. Yes, sir.
This is not an anterior amendment. I missed section 8. Just if I can ask for some semblance of a clarificatory guidance here. Yung pagtataas po ng sweldo, pag na-reclassify, Mr. President, after 3 years pa. So, hindi pwede magtaas ng sweldo ang na-reclassify na LGU kaagad.
Mr. President, if the LGU is reclassified, just like when for example, municipality becomes a city, it takes effect right away. The salary standardization, Mr. President.
My understanding, Mr. President, is that it would be effective after the next general income reclassification, and that is 3 years.
Next. Yes, Mr. President, you are correct, Senator Tolentino. When, for example, we pass this measure, it will take effect in the next
After 3 years.
Yes,
Next general income reclassification.
no, the following. Everything is Yes.
So the reason, Mr. President, I'm raising this is that the LGUs reclassified should be given the chance to raise the salary. So
That's correct.
if an amendment can still be made, an anterior amendment, instead of general income reclassification on page 7, it should be replaced with fiscal year. Kasi umangat na sila eh. The reason why the income was raised was because of the operation of the incumbent employees and department heads. And then, hindi naman sila nakinabang. Maghihintay pa sila ng 3 years. Eh, kung mangyari po yung pinangangambahan ni Senator Pimentel na hindi ka agad ma-reclassify again, 6 years pa ma-reclassify, so 6 years yung hinintay nila. And the Department of Interior and Local Government, they've been imposing additional burden on LGUs. Like for example, for you to qualify for a Seal of Good Local Governance Award, kailangan mag-create ka ng Risk Reduction Management Office, department head level. Eh yung mga mabababa pong munisipyo, hindi nila magawa yon kasi hindi nila ma-raise yung salary. Mababa po sa plantilla, sa grade scale nila. So it will be counterproductive and it will not boost the morale of the rank and file of, for instance, a fourth class or third class municipality. So, Mr. President, if the nodding of the head of the good sponsor would mean that I can still propose an anterior amendment, Mr. President, on page 7, line 11, just delete the words general income reclassification and replace it with fiscal year. So the following year, pwede na sila mag-angat ng sweldo.
Yes, Mr. President, I would agree to Senator Tolentino as long as the cap on the salary
Yes.
standardization is not breached, and then the following the next fiscal year, it should be effective already, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you for your amendment, Mr. Senator Tolentino.
Yes, Mr. President.
What-
The amendment's
can you-
carried, Mr. President.
Can we restate the amendment so that we don't make a mistake? Senator Tolentino, the Secretariat is requesting.
Motion na lang. Amendment na yun.
So this is on, Mr. President, on page 7,
Page 7,
line 11,
line 7.
line 11,
Sorry, page 7, line 11.
delete the words general income reclassification and replace it with fiscal year. So it will
Accepted
now
by
read
the,
as follows, Mr. President. A fourth or, I'm starting at line 7, a fourth or lower income class LGU, which is reclassified as first, second, or third income class following the first general reclassification provided herein, shall be exempted from providing for additional personal services and may maintain existing personnel prior to the reclassification pursuant to civil service rules and regulations until the next fiscal year, period.
It's duly accepted.
Yes, I
Suggestion
accept
from the body.
the proposed amendment of Senator
The
Tolentino.
proposed
Mr.
amendment
President.
of Senator Tolentino is approved.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank
Is
you,
it
Mr.
co-
President.
Was it
Mr.
duly
President.
noted by the Secretariat?
Mr. President, one more consequential amendment.
Please proceed.
On the same page 7, line 13, line 13,
Line 13.
delete the word general, delete the word general after the word succeeding, and replace it after the word succeeding, and on the same page, line 14, delete the words income reclassification and replace such words with fiscal year for purposes of consistency.
To gel with your first amendment. To jive, rather. Okay. The sponsor?
Yes, accepted, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Amendment's accepted.
Thank you.
And duly noted.
Mr. President, with no
We have
other,
Senator Jingo Estrada is recognized.
who is here to support his brother, Mr. President?
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I beg the indulgence of the body since I was not physically present during the earlier votation. If I were physically present during the votation, I would have voted for my good brother.
Yes. We knew, without a doubt, we knew you would vote with your brother.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, thank you to the better one. I'm touched really
Thank you.
by that gesture, Mr. President.
That's a very good gesture of friendship, brotherhood, and reconciliation. Mr. Majority Leader, we have not yet acted, apparently I'm being told by the Secretariat, we have not yet acted on section 13, the repealing clause.
The what? Enacted section 13.
The last amendment, 13.
Okay na.
It was read. But what's session suspended for?
No, it was read.
Apparently, yes, Majority Leader, just to be clear, the last amendment read by Senator JV on Section 13, the motion was, I said that the amendment with no objection is accepted and noted. I did not bang the gavel. I therefore bang the gavel now to make that formal.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. President, and with no other individual amendments, I move to close the period of individual amendments. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, the Majority Leader, period of individual amendments is closed.
Mr. President, with the consent of the body, I move that we approve on second reading Senate Bill number 2165. I so move, Mr. President.
There being no there are minority leaders recognized.
I will vote no, Mr. President.
Yes. We also recognize Senator Risa's negative vote. So there will be 2 negative votes out of all the members that are here present. Please record the Secretariat the 2 negative votes.
Move for the previous question, Mr. President.
There be no objection. Motion is approved. Senate Bill number 2165 is hereby approved on second reading.
Yes, Mr. President, with 2 negative votes. Mr. President, I now move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2165. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion, Majority Leader. Motion is approved.
Mr. President, just some administrative matters as already raised by Senator Francis Tolentino in view of the adoption of the resolution creating the Special Committee on Philippine Maritime and Admiralty Zones. I move to proceed with the Senate President's designation of its
Where is
members.
it? I don't-
I so move, Mr. President.
Once session suspended for half a minute. Yes, there be no objection to the motion of the Majority Leader. The following members are hereby designated to chair the prestigious committee. And I say a prestigious, very important committee, Your Honors, is Senator Francis Tolentino, chairperson, members Wing Gatchalian, Senator Ronald Bato del Rosa, Senator Robin Hood Padilla, Senator Bongo, Senator Sani Angara, and Senator Risa Ontiveros.
Kasali ka dyan? Maritime zone. Kasali ka dyan? You sure? Yes, I'm sure.
No, we do not have here Senator Lauren Legarde.
As an ex officio member, Mr. President, she is a
Okay.
member, Mr. President.
Yes. And both majority and minority leaders of the Senate are likewise designated as ex officio members of this committee. My apologies. And
Senate
the
President
deputy majority leader, the Senate President pro tempore, together with the majority and minority leaders, are both designated as ex officio members of the committee. The deputy majority leaders and deputy minority leaders shall also be members of the committee.
Yes. Maritime.
So, there be no objection. The designations are hereby adopted and elected accordingly.
Move for a minute suspension, Mr. President.
Session suspended.
Gusto ko mag-majority leader. Nabilis na eh.
I believe we'll be tackling the Caregivers Act, Majority Leader.
Yes, Mr. President, with the permission of the body, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2019 under Committee Report number 57. This is the Bill on Caregivers Welfare Act. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. The motion is approved.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we have sponsored the said bill, and with that, I move to open the period of interpellation and recognize the sponsor of the measure, Senator Jinggoy Estrada, and to interpellate Senator Coco Pimentel, our minority leader. I so move, Mr. President.
Colleague, Chairman of the Committee on Labor and Employment is recognized. Senator Jingo Estrada, and our distinguished Minority Floor Leader, Senator Pimentel is recognized as well.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the permission of our distinguished gentleman from San Juan, the older brother of our hardworking chairman who just passed his LGU income classification bill. More popular.
Hopefully,
This
the
permission,
Kuya can also pass his bill. into law.
Gladly, my privilege and my honor, Mr. President.
The caring kuya, Mr. President.
Yes.
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 As always.
And looking at the title of this measure, it gives us the subject matter very clearly, because this is to be known as the Caregivers Welfare Act, Mr. President. So if we can ask from the our sponsor, what is the situation of our caregivers of this particular bill, Mr. President?
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, among the many sectors of our workers, I believe that the caregivers sector is one of the most neglected sectors of our society. Similar to our kasambahays, they are in peculiar working conditions because most of them are working in the residences of their employers whose right to privacy are ensured. This makes it difficult to put boundaries on the scope and hours of work. Also, their work arrangements make them susceptible to being abused or even being exploited, Mr. President.
So if that is the case, Mr. President, how does the measure remedy the situation, Mr. President?
Well, this measure seeks to provide protection to caregivers in the Philippines. It
Okay.
aims to provide legal basis to ensure that their rights are upheld, their welfare is protected, and their benefits are adequately provided, Mr. President. And it contains provisions such as the duties of the caregivers, their hours of work, minimum wage, leave and other benefits, and basic necessities. At the same time, it seeks to ensure that employers and private employment agencies are likewise protected by outlining the pre-employment requirements, the contents of employment contract, and the conditions for the termination of contract, Mr. President. And if you would notice, Mr. President, this is similar to the bill that I filed during the 16th Congress. It was passed here in the Senate and in the House. It was enacted already into law, the Kasambahay Bill, Mr. President.
So yes, Mr. President, I could see that this has been patterned after the Kasambahay Bill, especially on the requirement for a contract. I think that is a unique feature or a novel feature in the Kasambahay law, Mr. President. And
Yes.
we are retaining that in this particular bill, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
So, Mr. President, the kasambahay, when a person works within the household of an employer, I think there will be a presumption that that person at the very least, is under a kasambahay arrangement. How about in the caregiving arrangement, Mr. President? How will we know if a person has been hired as a caregiver, Mr. President?
Well, again, as I've mentioned earlier, Mr. President, it is similar to our kasambahays. They are, excuse me, Mr. President.
Itong any license sa taas, page 2 sa taas, any license health penalties. Wala nang ganyan sa test na. Doon sila nag-clear.
Okay, Mr. President, one intention of this bill is to give clear distinction between kasambahay doing caregiving work and a caregiver, Mr. President. Kasambahay and their duties are defined under Republic Act number 10361, otherwise known as the Domestic Workers Act or Batas Kasambahay. If the kasambahay acquires NC2 for caregiving or becomes a licensed healthcare professional, he or she is entitled to the benefits provided under this bill. That means that he or she may enter into a contract with his or her employer as a caregiver and not as a kasambahay.
So,
And if I may continue.
yes,
Mr.
yes, sir.
It will be stipulated in the contract, Mr. President, that the service that will be rendered will be that of a caregiver, Mr. President.
So a caregiver who is the beneficiary of this measure is identified by the fact that that person holds a license, particular license, Mr. President?
Hmm? Well, first of all, a caregiver, Mr. President, is defined under Section 3A of this bill. It refers to a person who renders caregiving services and provides personal care support and assistance to clients in private homes, nursing or care facilities, and other residential settings, as stipulated in Section 7 of this Act, such as those, number one, licensed healthcare professionals listed in TESTA as caregivers, and number two, any person duly assessed and certified by TESDA upon compliance of any of the following. Number one, graduate of a caregiving qualification who achieved the required competencies. Number two, graduate of allied healthcare courses of an education and/or accredited training institution. And number three, practitioner or any person with prior learning and/or experience who has undergone competency or portfolio assessment.
So, Mr. President, a caregiver status, a person's status as a caregiver is authoritatively given by a government agency, Mr. President.
Well,
We
all
need-
caregivers, Mr. President, are those assessed and certified by TESDA, Mr. President.
So the caregiver, for a person to claim to be a caregiver,
Must be assessed and
he
certified.
must be assessed and certified by the TESDA, or he or she is a licensed healthcare professional registered with the TESDA.
You're
So-
correct, Mr.
So,
President.
okay, in both instances, there is a TESDA participation or intervention, Mr. President.
Correct.
Okay. So, okay. Unlike kasambahays, no? Kasambahays did not have any
No.
certification or registration with TESDA or any government agency. So,
No, you're correct, Mr.
okay
President.
po. Sige. Saan yung pag-raid? Yung raid na? Saan ka dito? Yung... Sabihin ko. Mr. President, the problem with involving the TESDA, Mr. President, is that I have been informed that there are only a number of schools accredited by TESDA and allowed by TESDA, authorized by TESDA to accredit or certify caregivers or some of the courses that are given by TESDA.
Accredited by TESDA.
Yeah, I think these schools do not even number up to 20, Mr. President.
Ilan ba?
Tama ba yun? Can you
Mr. President, if I may, Mr. President, with the indulgence of our dear colleagues, considering that we have some information with regard to technical vocational schools offering caregiving NC2, Mr. President. In the latest data, 2022, Mr. President, there were about 22,287 enrolled students, of which 19,936 graduated and 19,783 were certified. But there are currently only 147 technical vocational schools, Mr. President, offering this particular course, Mr. President.
And Mr. President, just to a follow-up question to our majority leader, when the school is authorized to offer a certain course like caregiving, the authority to issue certification is also automatic.
No, Mr.
Okay,
President.
that's what- Mr. President, so-
The TESDA's role, Mr. President, in fact, the bread and butter of TESDA is not to establish schools, but Mr. President, the sole authority in technical vocational education to certify students, Mr. President. So there is a mechanism, Mr. President. There are so-called assessment tools that TESDA is implementing with these technical vocational institutions, Mr. President.
Sorry,
Thank you.
that we have in.
So
And just to give additional information, Mr. President, and I bow to the statements of our majority leader since he headed the TESDA for quite some time, no? Well, we have 8 TESDA technical institutions providing training for caregiving NC2. And for assessment, for caregiving NC2, we have 12 TESDA technology institutions which serve as assessment centers. And these are private training and assessment centers, Mr. President.
So those are few in number, Mr. President. So 8 plus 12, 20. So I hope they are well distributed over the country, Mr. President. Taga Mindanao will have convenient access to all of these centers, Mr. President.
23 sa private and
Revenue by institution.
ito. Okay. If you may ask how many tested accredited training centers nationwide, in training we have 340 private technical vocational institutions or TVI offering caregiving NC2. And as far as assessment is concerned, we have 87 assessment centers for caregiving NC2 as of March 31 of this year, Mr. President.
82, 80, assessment center, 87.
So yung 32, sir, public, 33 private.
So,
Thank you, Mr. President. So since these are, it would be the assessment center which will be critical, right? Because without the assessment, there would be no certification by the TESDA. So I just hope that the 87 assessment centers are fairly and reasonably located in the Philippines, Mr. President, and they are not all concentrated here in the national capital region.
Scattered all around, no?
So that the caregiving as a career or as a skill
Yes.
can be accessible to
Yes, for the
equally
information,
to all to our
for the
citizens.
information of the minority leader, it is scattered all around the country, Mr. President. Are you not hungry yet, Mr. Minority Leader?
I will look at the map, Mr. President, on how the 87 are distributed. But anyway, there's nothing we can do about it except to encourage the putting up of more of these assessment centers. If should there be too few located in Mindanao. Huh?
I can give you the list, Mr. President. It's here with me.
From observation, Mr. President, do you see a lot of places in Mindanao?
In
Visayas?
Region 1, we have 4. If I may, Ilocos Norte, Ilocos Sur, La Union, Pangasinan. Region 2, we have 2, Cagayan and the province of Isabela. Region 3, we have 6 provinces of Bataan, Bulacan, Nueva Ecija, Pampanga, Tarlac, Zambales. Region 4A, which is Calabarzon, province of Batangas, provinces of Batangas, Cavite, Laguna, Quezon, and Rizal. And Region 4B, Mimaropa, provinces of Occidental Mindoro, Oriental Mindoro, and Palawan. Region 5, provinces of Albay, Camarines Sur. Region 6, in Western Visayas, we have Aklan, Iloilo, and Negros Occidental. Region 7, we have Bohol, Cebu, and Negros Oriental. Region 8, we have Eastern Samar, Leyte, Western Samar, and Southern Leyte. Region 9, City of Isabela, Zamboanga del Norte, Zamboanga del Sur, and Zamboanga Sibugay. Region 10, we have Bukidnon, Camiguin, Lanao del Norte, Misamis Oriental. Region 11, we have Davao del Norte, Davao del Sur, Davao Oriental. Region 12, Soxargen, Sarangani, and South Cotabato. And the Cordillera Administrative Region, we have provinces of Abra, Benguet, Ifugao, Kalinga. Region 13, Caraga, Agusan del Sur, Surigao del Sur. And in the NCR, we have Camanava, City of Manila, Pamamarisan, Pasmak. Ano yun? Pasay, Makati? Ha? Pasay, Pasmak? Pangit. Munti, Parlas, Tapat. Ano ba yan? Muntinlupa. Tapos, Parañaque, Las Piñas. Ano yung Tapat? Taguig, Pateros. Ayun. Almost all the major cities have been covered, Mr. President.
Yes, from the now.
Especially in Mindanao, we have 4 in Zamboanga Peninsula, 4 in Northern Mindanao, 3 in the Northern Mindanao and Davao, 2 in Soxargen, 2 in Caraga.
Kasi, yes, thank you for that, Mr. President. Mahalaga kasi ito kasi from the definition of a caregiver, you cannot be a caregiver unless you have been assessed and certified by TESDA.
Yes, and Mr. President, if I may add, with the enactment of this bill, Mr. President, into law, we are expecting for more training and assessment centers for caregivers that will be established in various parts of our country, Mr. President.
Okay. As well as the institutions siguro giving the courses. Iba po yung
Assessment.
iba pong assessment center from the institution giving the courses. Tama.
Yeah,
So,
kasama po yan.
So, tama, because, if this bill becomes a law, then we can foresee that we are encouraging, because of the protection being given to the profession or to the work, we're encouraging people to go into the said activity or the work, Mr. President. So, Mr. President, ito lang yung tanong ko po, tanong din ng aking staff, kasi ang iba, for example, nurse na or doktor na, and for some reason, sir, would rather perform caregiving activities does this person who is was been trained in a more extensive manner still required to
No more.
take the
No more.
assessment,
No more, Mr. President.
certification, etc.?
No more, Mr. President.
What will that person use, Mr. President? What will that person use as proof that I'm a caregiver?
His or her license from the PRC, Mr. President.
In his or her profession?
Yes.
So thank you for that so clarification, Mr. President. So baka hindi siya covered, Mr. President, kasi sa section 3A I and II. So if that is the flexibility that we want to enact, then maybe at the proper time, if we can review the wording and capture the scenario that we have just illustrated, Mr. President.
Maybe the period of amendments.
Yes, at the proper time,
Yes,
Mr.
at the proper
President.
time, Mr.
Yan,
President.
gusto sabihin, yun na daw kailangan. Yun na nga. So even just to be sure, Mr. President, even the nurse or the doctors or the PT, Mr. President, registration with the TESDA will not be necessary?
PT, ano ba yung PT? Hindi. Kailangan pa? Ha? Mag-enlist lang. If you are talking about the physical therapist, you will just enlist sa TESTA. Then no need to be reassessed, Mr. President.
Okay, what is the section applicable, Mr. President? Section 3AI? So registration is the word there. So that person needs to just register with the TESTA.
Yes, Mr. President. Any licensed healthcare professionals registered in TESTA as caregivers, Mr.
Okay,
President.
so it is the test. That means to say that at any given time, TESDA must always have a database of all caregivers or all of those caregiving services, Mr. President. Ganun ang mangyayari.
Yes, Mr. President, I think it is included in the bill, section 24. If I may read, Mr. President.
Section 24.
Registry of Certified Caregivers. TESTA shall maintain a registry of certified caregivers that shall be made available to the public pursuant to applicable laws, rules, and regulations.
So, yes, Mr. President, but section 3AI uses the word registered. It is 3AII which uses the word certified. So if our intention is that the database will capture both the registered and the certified, then probably at the proper time, if we could also improve the wording of section 24.
Yes, Mr.
So
President.
basta,
I'm open to any amendment.
basta ang ending is that at any given time, TESDA knows the caregivers and all of those caregiving services, Mr.
Correct,
President.
Mr. President.
So, as of the moment, Mr. President, how many can we say are caregivers here in the Philippines, Mr. President, as of the moment?
Right now, Mr. President, based on the data given to me by the TESDA, there are 145,342 caregivers who are NC2 holders from 2017 up to February of 2023 this year. This figure, however, is incomplete because it does not include caregiving practitioners who do not have NC2 and licensed allied healthcare professionals who are doing caregiving work, Mr. President. So that is just a ballpark figure, Mr. President.
Okay, so just to see if I understand this, Mr. President, this 145,000 plus caregivers, this would be the people who will fall under 3AII, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
And then those others mentioned by the sponsor would be those who will fall under 3A subparagraph I, Mr. President?
Yes, Mr. President.
Okay, but sa paragraph I mentions any licensed healthcare professionals. What would be those others, Mr. President, who are not licensed healthcare professionals, but rendering caregiving services, Mr. President?
Mami, kasambahay.
Is that possible or is that allowed or not allowed, Mr. President?
Yung mga hindi...
Kasi otherwise kung hindi ka licensed healthcare professional, sa 3AII ka, dapat ano ka, assessed and certified. Diba?
No, those who are not licensed. Those who are not licensed. Mr. President, according to those from TESDA, they do not have any data
Yes,
that can
if
provide. that
it's
we can
either you
provide.
fall, a caregiver would either fall under 3AI and be a licensed healthcare professional. May meaning ito, di ba? It would be PRC licensee holder. And then, if you are not that kind of a caregiver, you are under section 3A, subparagraph II. Okay,
Yes,
so,
Mr. President.
yes, Mr. President. So how about abroad, Mr. President? How many caregivers do we have working abroad?
Statistics abroad. Meron tayo statistics abroad eh.
Just in case lang po kung meron, kung wala, okay.
Yeah, meron po.
Apo.
Lahat to sa Amerika. Huh? We have 31,447 caregivers working abroad.
Okay. So 31,000.
Based on the data given to me by TESDA, this is given to us by the Department of Migrant Workers,
Yes.
Mr. President.
Let's
It is
just
around the globe, Mr. President, not only in the United States.
yeah. We will accept the figure, Mr. President. Ang question ko lang is, are those 31,000 plus caregivers working abroad potential beneficiaries of the bill, Mr. President?
Yes. Oh, of course. Huh?
Kung maging law ito, meron ba silang mararamdamang benepisyo?
Wala, ano?
Wala, no?
Wala.
Wala
I don't
po.
think so, Mr. President.
Okay. So wala. So this is really meant for
For
the
local
yes, for those
Filipinos working here. For
yeah,
caregivers
working
here.
in the Philippines.
Yes.
But I think in one of our discussions, Mr. President, the sponsor mentioned that as the caregiver can benefit from the certification by using it abroad, just in case he or she wants to work abroad, Mr. President.
Well, if the accepting country will require, then they have to enlist from the test and get the certification from TESTA for them to work abroad if the accepting country would require them to have a certificate, Mr. President.
Has that been proven, Mr. President, in
Yes.
actual experience that a country has respected and accepted the TESDA certification that the person is a licensed caregiver, certified caregiver?
Yes, according to my staffs here, it happened in Israel, Mr. President.
Okay, so at least good.
Yeah.
Okay, because with this law, Mr. President, all the more that since we will putting in rules, parameters, and regulations, we are in effect we are stricter in the regulation of the caregiver, then more trust would be put on our TESDA
Yes.
certification, Mr. President. So pwedeng makatulong po ito sa deployment. Ano pa?
Apo.
Birthday boy, andyan ang birthday. Ano pa? Hindi, last na.
Paano gugutom ka na?
Saan? Section?
It's San Lisa pa eh.
14. Kasi si employer to, si employer. So, Mr. President, I think our birthday boy has some birthday salubong ba tawag dyan? Birthday salubong. He's ready to spend an all-nighter, but being sensitive to the fact that we have this practice in the Philippines, part of our culture, that, you know, if it's your birthday tomorrow, you're given an
Birthday mo, boss.
early time off so that you can prepare for your birthday. So
Actually, no, it's my fault. I had asked
Mr.
the-
President,
excuse me,
it's
I had
not my
asked the
birthday,
majority
Mr.
leader.
President, just for the record. It's not my
No,
birthday.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
But,
Tomorrow.
it's my fault because I had asked the majority leader to speak to both gentlemen. So I have a dinner with Senator Rick Scott tonight at
Excuse me?
7:30.
I don't know.
I have a dinner with Senator Rick Scott of
Oh, yes.
the US Senate at 7:30, and I might be stuck in traffic. So
Yes,
if
sir.
I can make an appeal, we can continue tomorrow, if it's.
yes, I will, if I could suspend and just continue tomorrow for just a few more questions, and then the deputy minority leader will also conduct her interpellation tomorrow.
Mr. President, maybe the good one can preside,
Uh,
so we can finish the.
But problem is he's also joining me for the dinner.
Okay, okay.
The sponsor should join you for dinner, Mr. President.
Because Senator Jingo is also still waiting for his US visa. That's why he wants to join us for dinner. No, but I'd like to start that off the record.
Okay, Mr.
So-
President, no problem with me. I can, we can continue tomorrow.
Thank you very much to the sponsor.
We suspend tomorrow.
Yes, Mr. President, with that, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2019. So move, Mr. President.
There being no objection to the motion, majority floor leader, motion is approved.
With that, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023. So move, Mr. President.
There be no objection to the motion. We are we are adjourning session until the birthday of our distinguished majority floor leader.
Thank you.
That is tomorrow, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Wednesday, August 2, 2023. Have a good evening, everyone.